Welcome to Infinite Novel. Dive into epic alternate realities. All rights to original creators. Point of no return.
One lone, small Tuffle soldier stood guarding the door that led down to where the Saiyan prisoners were being kept. He stood still as stone, holding his rifle in his hands and staring straight ahead as other soldiers and scientists passed in front of him without paying him any attention. The atmosphere was tense, the smell of war in the air. Tales of Vegeta's strength and resourcefulness were legendary, and all precautions were being taken to ensure proper revenge. The soldier couldn't help but smirk at the thought. Sensing something, he turned and suspiciously looked at the closed door behind him. He visibly hesitated before looking over to the first soldier he saw coming his way. "Hey man, come here," he said, waving the other Tuffle over. "What is it?" the second, taller soldier demanded gruffly as he came over, carrying his own rifle. "Thought I heard something coming from down there," the first soldier said, motioning with his chin to the door. "What's taking Ares, anyways?" "Reports have found another space pod not far from here. It's definitely one of Freeza's men," the second soldier informed. "Don't know yet if it's Saiyan or not, much less the intent." "Shit," the smaller soldier swore, looking down. "What are we going to do?" "Ares is trying to use the sensors. We have to track whoever this is. He's put Vegeta and his spawn on the back burner for now." The first soldier nodded solemnly, looking back at the door. "Speaking of, I have a bad feeling about those two. I want to check it out, make sure everything's alright, but not by myself. I want some backup." The taller Tuffle snorted and rolled his eyes. "They're both restrained and weakened. You're probably just hearing things. You new here or something? Why are you so afraid?" "I've heard stories of Vegeta, idiot." "I'm not afraid, I'm just not stupid," the first soldier growled, angrily turning away and opening the door himself. "Just come with me to check things out, will you?" The taller of the two exhaled impatiently. "Fine, let's make it fast then." He then brushed past the smaller soldier, knocking him off balance a bit before heading down the darkened staircase. The smaller soldier grunted, following after the taller soldier with a smirk, closing the door behind them. "I can't believe I'm actually doing this," the taller soldier muttered to himself as he descended the stairs. "Goddamn new recruit!" Two hands suddenly reached out from around the corner at the bottom of the stairwell, grabbing the taller soldier's head and violently breaking his neck, killing him instantly. The smaller soldier flinched back in shock as his comrade's lifeless body fell to the ground in a heap. His murderer slowly came around the corner until he was facing the soldier directly. They stared at each other in silence for a few tense moments. Finally, the soldier looked over his shoulder up towards the door, and then looked back at the bruised and bloody lavender-haired teenager standing in front of him. With a grunt of approval, the soldier reached up and removed his helmet, freeing his dark hair which instantly stood up like a flame. "Thought you didn't have it in you to kill, boy," Vegeta said, his raw and gruff voice indifferent as he tossed his helmet aside. Trunks caught the slightest hint of surprise in his dark eyes, the burned one now opened but completely bloodshot. Trunks looked down at the body lying between them, his blue eyes darkening. The 5 or so minutes that he had waited for his father to return had been the longest of his life. In that short amount of time, the anxiety of not knowing whether Vegeta would be sniffed out and killed was worse than anything Trunks had ever experienced in his time. Sitting alone in their prison, surrounded by blood and a stripped-down dead soldier in front of him, the pain he had seen and was currently in, the violence painting this time, the dead, empty gaze of the young soldier Vegeta had killed that seemed to be looking right at him, just like Gohan's. Something inside of Trunks was finally starting to break. "I'm a survivor first and foremost," Trunks finally replied, his tone rougher than usual as he raised his eyes to meet his father's. He cracked a smirk that made Vegeta feel like he was looking in a mirror. "Kill or be killed, right?" Vegeta stared at the teenager. He had fully planned on taking care of whoever the unfortunate bastard was that came down with him, and was honestly shocked that the kid had stepped up to the plate instead. Taking a good, thorough look into the boy's eyes, Vegeta could see clear as day that he was finally beginning to break. It was exactly what Vegeta had hoped for, precisely what he had wanted to see ever since he had first stumbled upon the boy. And yet, he inexplicably felt no excitement and no pride over it. There was no sense of victory, no satisfaction. Suddenly needing to look away from the boy's surprisingly cold gaze, Vegeta scowled and bent over, grabbing one of dead soldier's feet. The Tuffles are preoccupied at the moment, so we have a little time," the Saiyan prince growled, dragging the body around the corner and over to their prison cell while Trunks slowly limped after him. "Preoccupied?" Trunks asked curiously. "Seems we have company," Vegeta said, wincing as he finally let go of the body. "Get to work, boy," he ordered, before turning back around and leaving Trunks alone again, not even bothering to look at his son as he left. Gingerly, the teenager lowered himself to the ground in front of this new dead body. Not wasting any time, he removed his helmet. He consciously avoided that cold death stare as he set the helmet aside, before beginning to take the soldier's white suit off. Vegeta returned a few moments later, walking through the entrance Trunks had blasted earlier, once again wearing his helmet. It made hiding his pain that much easier. He dropped a rifle next to Trunks, holding his own expertly with his other hand. Ignoring the teenager, Vegeta walked across the cell and leaned up against the wall. He briefly contemplated sitting down and resting, but he knew he had to remain standing from now on. If he sat down now, he wasn't sure he could get back up. Squinting through the bars, he listened for any sign of someone coming down. "Hurry up, kid," Vegeta growled, shooting Trunks an impatient glance. "What did you mean when you said we have company?" Trunks asked as Vegeta looked down at the rifle in his hands. The Tuffles found a space pod that's not ours, Vegeta answered, lifting the rifle up and aiming it at the dead body in front of Trunks. He pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. Growling, he looked back down at it in frustration. You think Nappa or Raditz came back for us? Trunks asked, yanking a boot off the soldier. That would be the best case scenario, Vegeta reluctantly admitted, deep down hoping it was one of them who had come and not someone from the Ginyu Force. He had lost all sense of time, and didn't know how long he and the boy had been trapped by the Tuffles. After a certain amount of time, if you didn't report to base, you were classified as a deserter. Vegeta's hands suddenly trembled involuntarily. He scowled and gripped his rifle tighter, willing it to stop. I'm sure we'll find out soon enough, he added, looking through the bars again. Yeah, but if it's not Nappa or Raditz, then who dash fucking hell, boy, Vegeta hissed furiously. Just shut your mouth and get on with it. Trunks instantly moved faster, as fast as he could with his injuries. Vegeta looked back out through the bars, squeezing his eyes shut as a wave of nausea and dizziness ran through him. If he wouldn't have been leaning against the stone wall, he wasn't sure he would have remained standing. He could hear his heartbeat ringing in his ears, and could feel cold sweat running down his back. Hey, you okay? Trunks asked, trying not to sound alarmed, but it looked like Vegeta was moments away from collapsing. Vegeta instantly forced his eyes back open. He blinked a few times and shook his head. He had to last. He looked back at Trunks and very quickly regained his composure. I can take care of myself, half-breed, he sneered angrily. Trunks frowned at him. It's Trunks. What are you talking about now, blasted boy? Trunks. My name is Trunks, the teenager said, pulling his permanently borrowed helmet over his head to complete his tough outfit. Vegeta stared at him in blank disbelief, before shaking his head. I have a half-breed son named Trunks, he spat in disgust, looking off through the bars again. My eternal humiliations truly have no bounds. Just thought you should know, Trunks mumbled, looking down at his white metallic-looking suit and making sure there were no blood stains on it. In case we don't make it out of here alive, Trunks added silently. He bent down gingerly, picking up the rifle Vegeta had dropped next to him. He curiously examined it. It was large but surprisingly light. They don't work, Vegeta said, pushing himself off the wall and walking over to his son. But they have to work. Otherwise, why carry them at all? Trunks asked. Lifting it up, he aimed it at the opposite wall that Vegeta had just been leaning against just moments ago. Vegeta growled in annoyance. Why was this boy so goddamn stubborn? We have more important things too. Vegeta's voice trailed off when Trunks pulled the trigger. Something that looked like a red laser shot out of the rifle and sliced through the supposedly impenetrable stone wall as if it was butter. Silent, fast, deadly. Vegeta and Trunks both stared at the hole it left in its wake. Alright, that's it. We're switching, kid, Vegeta said, roughly shoving his rifle into Trunks' chest and taking the teenager's instead. What's wrong with yours? Trunks asked, looking down at the new rifle he held in his hands with a frown. Doesn't work, Vegeta growled, feeling the cold sweat covering his torso now. His hands involuntarily started to tremble again, making him hiss in frustration as he exited the cell. His head felt like it was going to explode any moment now. He went up 2 stairs when he realized that Trunks wasn't following him. Closing his eyes, Vegeta cracked his neck to keep himself from screaming in frustration. Turning back around, one eye closed from the painful migraine he was fighting off, Vegeta stalked back over to Trunks, ignoring how taxing the simple action felt on his weakened body. What the fuck are you doing, kid? The prince hissed as soon as the teenager came into view. We have to move, now. I know, I'm almost done, Trunks said with a frown as Vegeta walked closer. He tilted his head in curiosity when he saw that Trunks had actually taken the rifle apart. I've seen this design before. Just a few more seconds. Vegeta scowled and looked from the rifle up to Trunks. You know weapons. Yeah, my mom developed a ton of them to help us survive, Trunks admitted, his hands moving expertly as Vegeta looked on. I had to learn how to use them and to teach others to use them. Been doing this since I was old enough to talk. Course when I got older, I stopped using them, but she kept developing weapons to help the others try to defend themselves. Didn't help that much though, he admitted bitterly. Your mother developed weapons? Vegeta asked, his eyes wide with genuine shock. His mind started racing as he wondered who the hell this boy's mother was. He wouldn't characterize any of the women he had betted as being that, well, intelligent. Yeah, she's a genius. I've seen something like this before when I was a kid, Trunks said, snapping the rifle shut. Lifting it up to his shoulder, he aimed it at the wall and fired. Sure enough, this time it actually worked. Vegeta stared at the hole the laser left in the wall as Trunks snickered. Like I said, this stuff is amateur, the teenager said with an arrogant smirk. Vegeta looked back at his son for a few seconds, his intense gaze unreadable. Finally, he snorted in amusement. Well now, it seems to me that your mother was good for more than one thing, he said, a smirk creeping up on his face. Trunks instantly turned crimson red behind the glass shield of his helmet at the statement, making Vegeta laugh loudly in response. Come on, kid, let's get out of here. The prince turned and headed towards the stairs, still snickering lightly to himself at the kid's response as Trunks obediently followed him. Vegeta looked over his shoulder briefly, taking a glance at the teenager as Trunks forced himself up the stairs behind him. His laughter gone, Vegeta silently took in the way Trunks forced himself on despite his clear pain without a word or sound of complaint. He scowled and looked ahead, continuing up the stairs. It seemed the boy was more resilient than he had given him credit for, but then again, he was his son. Finally, Vegeta walked out through the door, both of his eyes easily open and alert as he appeared to all the world like a bored soldier with no physical ailments to speak of. It didn't hurt that the tinted glass on his helmet helped disguise just how badly bloodshot one of his eyes was. Unless someone got right in his face to see his burns, he was in the clear. Trunks emerged a second later after his father. The teenager blinked a few times, squinting at the sudden bright light that greeted him as he closed the door behind him. It was a far cry from the dark dungeon where they had been kept. "Let's move, kid," Vegeta communicated silently to Trunks, turning and walking off. Trunks walked after him, his face reddening with excruciating pain as he made his best effort to walk normally. Despite his valor, he had a subtle limp, noticeable to anyone who paid close attention. Well aware of Trunks' injuries, Vegeta walked as fast as he could while still allowing Trunks to keep pace with him. All the while, Trunks couldn't believe how easy Vegeta made this look. Trying to distract himself from his physical discomfort, Trunks took a look around at the enormous military-style base they were in. There must have been hundreds of soldiers walking about, all of them wearing the same white metallic suits that he and Vegeta were now wearing. It simply boggled Trunks' mind that so many had joined Ares' side just to defeat three Saiyans. Did it truly warrant an entire army to take out Vegeta, Nappa, and Raditz? After a few seconds of thought, Trunks concluded that yes, it probably did. Vegeta suddenly stopped walking, making Trunks damn near collide into him from behind. "Look there, boy," the prince ordered, motioning with his head for Trunks to look to the left. "What are we looking at?" Trunks whispered, trying to spot something out of the ordinary, but no one was paying them any attention at the moment. "You," came the cold and simple answer. What dashed before Trunks realized what was happening, Vegeta kicked him as hard as he could, viciously slamming the heel of his boot right into Trunks' already damaged knee and shattering the bones in the joint on impact. Completely caught off guard, Trunks collapsed in a heap, unable to suppress the howl of agony and betrayal that exploded out of him. With the skill of a well-practiced liar, Vegeta fell to his knees next to Trunks, his eyes wide with shock as if he had no clue what was wrong with the teenager. Putting a supportive hand on Trunks' shoulder, he frantically turned to the audience they now had. "We need a medic," Vegeta yelled at them. His words sounded like complete nonsense to Trunks, who didn't understand the Tuffle language and had long since lost his scouter for translation. Trunks exhaled through his clenched teeth, his eyes squeezed tightly as he clutched his knee and rolled onto his side. Vegeta lightly patted the side of his son's helmet as a medical team ran up to them. "What happened?" someone asked as Vegeta stood up, holding his rifle tightly. "The kid's leg just blew out from under him," Vegeta explained, concern in his voice as he looked on while they tried tending to Trunks, who was very reluctantly allowing it. The prince scowled, taking them all in while they were distracted. Sweat ran into his eyes and he squinted at them, one eye twitching from his stress. One wrong move, and they'd be pressed into action here. Looking off to the side out of the corner of his eye, he knew they wouldn't last. "Not yet. This kid's knee is practically destroyed. We have to take him to the infirmary," one of the medics said, drawing Vegeta's attention. Vegeta nodded his understanding. They all started grabbing Trunks to lift him when the teenager hissed defensively. Completely out of the loop without the help of his scouter to translate, the only conclusion Trunks could come up with was that his father had betrayed him and thrown him to the wolves to save himself. In desperation, Trunks started summoning up whatever scraps of energy he had left. It was hard with the key-draining metal clamps under his uniform, but he could make do. "Let them help you, boy," Vegeta ordered Trunks silently, startling the teenager. Trunks glanced over and made eye contact with his father, who offered him a subtle nod. The teenager gritted his teeth together, not sure whether or not he could trust his father. Finally though, he gave him the benefit of the doubt. Extremely reluctantly, Trunks stopped struggling, even though he remained tense. He only relaxed a small bit when he realized that the Tuffle surrounding him seemed to be legitimately concerned for his knee. "Got a new one for you," the leader of the medical team announced as he led the way inside the infirmary. His team carried Trunks inside and placed the highly uncomfortable teenager on an examination table. Vegeta quietly stepped inside after them, glancing around. On the far wall, there was a whole slew of medications. He cocked his head to the side, scowling as his eyes finally settled on the doctor in the room. He was an old man with tousled white hair and sharp blue eyes, clad in a simple white robe. "Well, what have we here?" the doctor asked cheerfully, turning to Trunks, who gave him an uneasy look. "Another training accident. His knee is destroyed," one of the Tuffles explained, remaining in the room to help as the other two in the medical team left, not deeming the situation as terribly serious. Trunks flinched and hissed when they started examining his knee, trying his hardest not to show his massive distrust. Shooting a glance over at the third and quiet person in the room, Trunks growled to himself when he saw that Vegeta wasn't paying them one bit of attention. Indeed, Vegeta was completely tuning them out as he curiously walked over to the wall with the medications. His dark, bloodshot eyes quickly scanned over what they had. Pain relief, vitamins, anesthetics. His scowl deepened in frustration, and he was about to leave altogether when he looked up at the top shelf and saw exactly what he was looking for. Turning around, he quietly headed to the door and locked it. "All right son, help me get this uniform off this boy so I can examine the injury directly," the doctor instructed, turning to the side as he flicked a syringe with an anesthetic. "This shot will numb his pain in a hurry so we can fix up that knee." "Sure thing," the other Tuffle said, looking at Trunks and seeing his intense discomfort. The teenager's face was bright red from the agony he was in as he breathed heavily through his teeth, making the Tuffle frown. "Hey, you can relax. We're going to help you. What's your name?" "His name is Trunks," a gruff voice snarled from behind him, the unmistakable feel of a rifle pressing up against the back of his skull. The Tuffle's eyes grew wide and he opened his mouth to speak, but he was dead before he got the chance. The Tuffle collapsed in a lifeless heap after Vegeta shot a hot laser beam right between his eyes. Trunks watched the cold-hearted murder without flinching, uncharacteristic indifference coloring the blue of his eyes as the doctor spun around to face them. The old man's eyes widened in horror at the dead body on the floor. He gasped, "What in the dash?" His words choked in his throat when Vegeta suddenly turned the rifle on him. Before he knew it, the rifle was pressed right against his forehead, eliciting terrified trembling from the doctor. "You'll be next carcass in this room if you don't do exactly as I say. Do not test me, old man," Vegeta growled dangerously. Unable to stand the heat a second longer, the Saiyan prince removed his helmet and let it fall to the floor, his hair instantly snapping up once freed. This time, Trunks did flinch at the sight of his father's badly bloodshot and glazed-over eyes. The doctor's trembling grew worse as he stared death right in its bloodshot eyes. He had heard stories of Vegeta's reputation for violence, but had never once suspected he would actually come face to face with the man himself. Quite suddenly, he was sorely regretting ever taking this job. What do you want?" he stuttered. "Tell me where the antidote is for the poison I was given," Vegeta ordered harshly. "I don't know what the poison was." Vegeta closed his eyes and cracked his neck, his veins visibly throbbing on his neck and his temples. For some reason, this terrified the old man more than any words the Saiyan could possibly say. "But if you tell me the symptoms." "Father," Trunks cut in. Vegeta opened his eyes with visible effort, turning his delirious gaze to Trunks. "They know we're gone. I can hear them. We don't have much time." Vegeta growled and pressed the rifle harder against the doctor's skin. "I do not have time for your games, old man," the prince hissed, his hands trembling. "Tell me where the antidote is or I will rip your eyes out of your fucking skull." "Understand. How were you poisoned?" "Ares sent a Tuffle whore for me and she gave me the venom." The doctor raised a trembling finger to the top shelf. "If it's what I'm thinking of, it should be in the small yellow container at the top, second from the left." Vegeta grunted and snatched the syringe out of the doctor's hand. "Here, kid, this will help your knee," he said, shoving it in Trunks' direction. Trunks blinked in surprise, before taking the syringe out of his father's hand. "Watch him," Vegeta ordered his son, fixing the old man with a cold glare that left no need for a verbal warning. Trunks stared after his father for a moment before looking down at the syringe in his hand. Where the hell was he supposed to put it? Right in his knee? As if sensing his indecision, the doctor silently pointed to the teenager's knee. The small, helpful gesture surprised Trunks and made the teenager feel a horrible pang of guilt in his heart over the man's inevitable death. Looking down at the dead Tuffle medic on the floor, at his dead and empty eyes, why did they always have to stare at him afterwards? That sick and volatile feeling that had washed over him earlier when Vegeta had left him alone returned with a vengeance. It was as if there was a slow combustion of hatred and sinister violence burning deep inside of his chest, hatred towards the Tuffles, towards Freeza, towards the entire universe and the goddamn unfairness of it all. And of course, a substantial amount of hatred was reserved for himself. The teenager's hand holding the syringe was trembling when the doctor's hand settled over his. Trunks flinched at the contact, before pulling his hand away. Too short to reach the top shelf and too weak for simple levitation, Vegeta desperately slammed the butt of his rifle up against the shelf. He caught the yellow bottle that fell, scowling as he tried reading what it said. He had to blink a few times to clear his vision enough, but it was indeed an antidote for poison. Figuring that was good enough confirmation, he forced the bottle open and chugged down all of the contents at once. "Alright, kid," Vegeta said, tossing the bottle aside. "Let's move." Trunks shifted his weight on the table, swinging his legs over the edge. Gingerly, he slid off and put very little weight on his bad leg, ignoring the fact that his right boot was inches away from a dead body. He could feel an explosion of warmth spreading through his knee and running up and down his leg, gratefully numbing his pain. Meanwhile, Vegeta slipped his helmet back on, turning to the old man in the room. "How long until this antidote works?" he demanded. Still clearly terrified, the doctor turned to the prince and tried his best not to stutter. "It will begin to work immediately, but the effects are slow." Vegeta grunted, turning to Trunks and tossing him his rifle back. He motioned with his head to the doctor in the room. "Take care of him at once," he ordered, before turning and heading towards the door. The burning in Trunks' chest burned deeper at Vegeta's callous order, until he felt like it was going to burn him alive from the inside out. Trunks hesitated only a moment, a small, faint voice of reason trying valiantly to make itself heard in a dark corner of his mind. It was easily suppressed by the sheer terror that had consumed the teenager when he thought he had single-handedly caused his father's death for being merciful. His normally clear blue eyes were a darker, desensitized blue as he very nonchalantly raised his rifle to his shoulder, aiming for the spot right between the old man's horrified eyes with rock-steady hands. Trunks started to squeeze the trigger when an alarm suddenly went off. Vegeta cursed under his breath as Trunks looked over his shoulder at him. "What the hell is that?" Trunks asked, glancing up at a red alarm that was blinking near the ceiling in the room. Vegeta ignored him for several seconds before slowly cracking open the door about an inch. Everyone was running now in the same direction, but for what? To track them down, or to fight someone else? As if reading his mind, the old man in the room spoke up. "Ares is calling for an emergency assembly." Vegeta turned his attention back to him, narrowing his eyes suspiciously. "For what purpose?" The poor old doctor looked from Vegeta to the boy who was still aiming a rifle at him, and then back to Vegeta. He wished he could come up with a lie on the spot, but he honestly had no idea. Opting to come clean than be caught in a lie, he meekly answered with I don't know. Father and son exchanged a look with silent understanding. Trunks then turned and fired. The teenager's right eye twitched involuntarily as he slowly lowered his rifle, staring down at the fallen Tuffle Doctor with no remorse in his eyes. Vegeta looked on in approval, surveying the violence with familiar disinterest before turning back to the door. He peeked out again, and Trunks was just vaguely aware of him saying something that didn't quite register to him. The teen tilted his head in morbid curiosity as he watched a pool of blood spread under the body he was looking at. It was red just like his. Hey kid, let's go, Vegeta hissed to deaf ears. We have to fall in with them before they find us here and our cover is blown. Trunks scowled and clenched his jaw tightly, reminding himself that the man had to die. Do you fucking hear me talking to you, boy? I'll leave you here for the Tuffles to tear you apart if you don't move. Now, everyone there. They all had to die. Trunks blinked and snapped out of it, finally realizing what he was doing. Swallowing heavily, he turned away from the dead body only to practically step on the other one in the room. He flinched as he stepped into blood, damn near losing his balance and falling into it. He grit his teeth at the pain in his leg, diminished but ever present as he forced himself to limp over to his father. Sorry, he mumbled sheepishly. Vegeta looked away from the crack in the door over to his son and silently observed him. The boy looked stoic and unaffected, but Vegeta perfected that front as a child and could see right through it. The kid was as transparent as glass, his morals and his sanity were crumbling by the minute. Hell, a few more years of this, and the boy would be just like him. At the thought, the muscle in Vegeta's jaw flexed. He looked away again. Come on, kid. The Tuffles want a war. It's time we give them one. Trunks had never felt so much heat in his life. He looked up a little bit to see two suns shining brightly in the sky. It was fitting that they were standing on sand at the moment, because it sure felt like they were in a desert. Glancing to his right, standing about 5 men away from him, he saw his father. They were all lined up in a perfect grid, all standing in perfect attention like machines rather than men, with Trunks and Vegeta both near the back. Trunks squinted as sweat ran into his eye, before sneaking another look over at his father, but Vegeta was ignoring him. More than anything, Trunks wished he would have asked Vegeta how the hell he could talk to him using only his mind. He tried thinking as hard as he could, but either Vegeta wasn't hearing him or he was just flat out ignoring him. Both were equally likely. What Trunks really wanted to know was why they were even out here. All he could do was trust in Vegeta's plan. At least, Trunks sure as hell hoped he had a plan. Trunks' heart was pounding with anticipation when a roar went through the Tuffle army, making him turn his attention straight ahead. Far ahead he could see Ares stride in front of his men on top of an elevated platform. To his right, he sensed a flicker of Vegeta's ki rise. Brothers, Ares boomed loudly, immediately settling everyone down. We are here to wage war against the evil in the universe, the ruthless Saiyans. Are you prepared to win the good fight? Enthusiastically and ready to die for him, everyone, save two, roared their approval. But before we take our revenge against Vegeta and his worthless race, we must face an even greater evil. It seems one or possibly more of Frieza's men are here. I ask each of you, are you ready for war and to avenge the innocent blood of our families and friends at the hands of these monsters? Vegeta's ears were ringing as everyone roared again in frenzied affirmation. He scoffed, thinking these fools were completely delusional if they thought they stood a chance against whoever had arrived. Even the lowest-ranked soldiers in Frieza's army could destroy this pathetic excuse of a military force. If Frieza sent one of his high-ranked lieutenants, or even worse, a member of the Jinya force, then everyone standing there was as good as dead. Including him, he reluctantly conceded. Especially him. Ares took in the rain cheers and roars, coldly scanning his men through his sleek helmet. I know you're here, Vegeta, he thought furiously to himself as he tried picking out two soldiers who looked worse for wear. He had made the mistake of assuming that all the Saiyan knew how to do was purge planets and follow Frieza's orders. He had sorely underestimated the prince's intelligence, and now had blood on his hands for that mistake. Where are you, coward? Removing his helmet with one hand, Ares raised it to his men. Everyone, raise your helmets high and repeat after me. Trunks grit his teeth tightly together as the soldiers around him followed his lead. Neither he nor Vegeta moved a muscle. Vegeta's muscles were so taut with tension that his bones ached. Knowing they didn't have any time left, the prince closed his eyes and silently swore on his family's honor that he would not lose this fight. He was going to finish what his ancestors started if it was the last thing he ever did. Hey, the soldier standing to Vegeta's right said, poking the Saiyan in the side with his rifle. Vegeta slowly opened his eyes which were bloodshot with intended murder. He said to raise our hell dash. Vegeta hauled the startled and oblivious soldier to him by the rifle, spun it around so the rifle was placed securely under his chin, and fired. No one realized what was happening until the soldier's lifeless body landed in a heap, and by then, Vegeta had already viciously taken down the soldier that had been standing behind him, breaking his neck so violently he damn near took the man's head right off. Vegeta slowly straightened as the soldiers near him all backed up in panic, raising their rifles and aiming them right at him. They all started screaming curses and pretty soon, everyone's attention turned to him. Sneering at them, the proud prince reached up and removed his helmet, letting it fall to the sand. He tossed his rifle aside, not willing to use it any longer. Still unnoticed, Trunks stayed still as he watched, his right hand lowered in a tight fist as he worked on summoning up his ki. Turning around with a look in his dark eyes like he had finally tumbled into the insanity he'd flirted with his whole life, Vegeta looked at the approaching form of Ares. He smirked and crossed his arms casually, as if they were the only two there and he wasn't completely outnumbered. So you finally show yourself, murderer, Ares snarled. Fight me like a man, Ares. Show your men how weak you truly are, Vegeta taunted, his smirk turning sinister. Or, you could surrender now, bow at my feet and call me Lord Vegeta. I might spare one or two of your men if you showed me that respect. Ares scoffed with disgust as he finally came about 5 feet away from the Saiyan prince. Surrender? Why would I ever surrender to a dead man? Vegeta opened his mouth to respond when the little energy his body had finally disappeared. Helplessly sinking to his knees, he leaned forward on both hands, his vision blurring. Ares smirked as Trunks breathed heavily in his helmet, his face red with pain and raw exhaustion as a faint yellow blow suddenly surrounded his fist. If it weren't for those fucking metal clamps draining his ki, he would have turned everyone there to ashes. You don't have much time left, Saiyan. Why don't you just give up? Ares sneered. Vegeta gave a low chuckle, before that chuckle slowly morphed into loud, maniacal laughter. He leaned his head back and laughed like a madman as Trunks watched him with wide eyes, convinced his father had finally lost it completely. The Tuffles surrounding him all looked at each warily, their rifles still pointed at him as Ares took a threatening step closer. What is so funny, he demanded. Everyone here is going to die, Vegeta laughed. Trunks frowned, his heart pounding in concern when he suddenly sensed a different power level. Looking over, standing where Ares had been addressing his army, was one enraged Saiyan. Off his right hand was a levitating, pulsing white ball of brilliant energy. Hey, you freaks, Nappa yelled, drawing everyone's attention. The Saiyan growled, the vein in his temple pulsing furiously as the energy ball grew stronger. Heads up. Rearing back, Nappa launched the ball of energy to the sky where it exploded into blinding white light. Everyone who looked directly at the light had their retinas burned off on the spot, except for one hybrid teenager who found himself completely mesmerized by the light. Left breathless by the deep and primitive calling in his blood that he had never felt before, Trunks took a staggering step back. Still on his knees and ignoring the blinded men screaming around him, Vegeta stared up at the light. His canines extended and his pupils seeming to be completely gone, Vegeta's entire body was pulsing involuntarily in rhythm with his heartbeat. Having forgotten about the prince, Ares turned and instantly knew what was happening. Get him! Don't let him make the transformation! Ares screamed, pointing at Vegeta. The soldiers who still had the wherewithal to listen to him turned to fire at Vegeta right as fur ruptured onto his skin. They were instantly incinerated by Trunks' vicious ki blast before they ever got the chance. With exceptional skill, Trunks controlled his blast so Vegeta was left unharmed. Ares fell back from the explosion, finally looking over at Trunks in shock. The teenager reached up and took off his helmet, gasping in a lungful of fresh air, his lavender hair darkened with sweat and stuck to his forehead. That was all the distraction Vegeta needed. Releasing a furious scream that quickly turned into a deep, raw, animalistic roar, Vegeta suddenly exploded in size as everyone around him showed their true colors and ran away in terror. Vegeta's tough uniform was instantly shredded, the metal clamps he'd been wearing snapping off like they were plastic, leaving him in his original dark blue trousers and white boots. Trunks dropped his helmet at his side, before losing the strength in his leg and falling back. His eyes widened as he watched Vegeta's eyes turn blood red as fur covered him completely. He had never seen anything like it in his life, having only heard stories from Gohan. Looking over, Nappa was also making the same transformation, his Saiyan uniform easily expanding with his size. Nappa and Vegeta both faced each other, before releasing simultaneous, powerful roars. Half of the Tuffle army immediately lost all desire to fight the good fight and took off running to save themselves as hysteria filled the air. The rest started firing their rifles in desperation as the two Saiyans started crushing everyone that moved. Trunks was completely blown away by how easily both Vegeta and Nappa moved despite their size. Neither had any difficulty at all dodging the laser beam shot at them by the Tuffle rifles. He could have sworn that he heard Vegeta laugh as he slammed his enormous boot on a group of fleeing Tuffles, killing them instantly. Suddenly in mid-breath, a large and powerful hand reached out and grasped him tightly. His blood running cold with shock and horror, he could only struggle helplessly as Vegeta lifted him so they were eye level. What are you doing, father? Trunks screamed at him, looking into red eyes that he would never have a chance at reading. I'm on your side. Vegeta stared at the teenager, who was certain that this time, his father would make good on his threat to kill him. Trunks clenched his teeth tightly as Vegeta raised his other large hand to him, putting 2 fingers on the sides of Trunks' neck, before applying pressure. Trunks closed his eyes, telling himself he shouldn't have felt betrayed. Vegeta had flat out told him that he would make him pay for putting him in this situation to begin with. He waited for the crushing pressure that would kill him, too drained of his strength to fight back. Needless to say, he was shocked when Vegeta applied just enough pressure to break the ki draining clamp around his neck. Blinking in surprise, Trunks looked at the creature holding him and could have sworn he saw a smirk. You're not useful to me with these things on you, boy, the creature rumbled in a deep and, dare he say it, amused voice. Trunks couldn't help the relief that coursed through him, and already felt the difference it made not to have that thing around his neck. It took Vegeta only a few seconds, breaking the clamps on his son like they were nothing, only mild little zaps tingling his fur upon touching them. Help Nappa clean up this mess, Vegeta ordered, lowering Trunks and then releasing him altogether. What about you? Trunks demanded, but Vegeta had already turned away from him. Figuring his father was capable of taking care of himself, Trunks looked down at his right hand. With little effort, he formed a powerful blue ball of ki in the palm of his hand. He smirked. Now that was more like it. Meanwhile, having seen the legendary Uzuru transformations up close, Ares decided he wanted no part of it. Somewhere along the way, his master plan for revenge had blown up in his face. He had no idea how that had happened. He had spent years planning Vegeta's downfall, and everything had gone according to plan. Even Vegeta's son, the heir to the throne and a boy Ares never even knew existed, had been perfectly gift-wrapped for his revenge. The stars had lined up perfectly and it was only a matter of time. Now hearing the anguished screams of his men being slaughtered by relentless ki blasts and crushed by ape-like monsters, Ares was left to his last option, retreat. Bursting through one of the scientific development rooms on his military base, he quickly strode over to the device in the center of the room. Not wasting any time, he instantly flipped open one of the control panels and activated the device so he could summon up a spaceship. That's as far as he got when the wall suddenly exploded, crumbling to pieces. Faster than he could react, an enormous hand reached in and grabbed hold of him. Well, what have we here? Vegeta growled, pulling Ares out of the building and lifting him up. He squeezed him hard, laughing when he felt Ares' armor cracking under the force of his grip. I could smell your fear from miles away, Tuffle. Curse you, Saiyan, Ares spat out, before feeling Vegeta's grip tighten mercilessly. Ares coughed up blood in response, his armor caving and putting an extraordinary amount of pressure on his ribs. Hey, I thought your armor was supposed to be impenetrable. I'm disappointed, Vegeta's voice rumbled deeply. He reached up with his other hand and flicked Ares' helmet off as if he was a toy, before laughing loudly. Coward, Ares rasped out, one eye shut in excruciating pain. Fight me without this transformation. Who are you calling a coward, fool? Vegeta snarled, squeezing Ares even harder. You had me trapped like a mongrel pet and you poisoned me. What, are you afraid you'll lose? You should be, Ares taunted, pushing on. If Vegeta was known for anything other than his cruelty, it was his pride. Knowing he was close to being crushed to death, Ares pressed on undeterred in desperation. I've been trained in dash. He spat out blood as Vegeta applied bone-crushing force with his grip energy techniques. You are no match for me, Vegeta. It was a bold-faced lie, but he was a desperate man. Enraged at the blatant challenge and dangerously close to having lost his mind, Vegeta released Ares, who fell almost 20 feet to the ground. The prince turned to the light in the sky and roared his fury, drawing the sudden attention of Trunks and Nappa. The two stopped their merciless assaults to look over at the prince. Extending one hand towards the light, palm out, Vegeta made a tight fist. The light suddenly exploded, and this time, Trunks had to look away or he would have been blinded on the spot. Ares winced as he rolled over to his side in the sand, clutching his ribs. Not too far from him were the crushed remains of a once proud army he had built from the ground up. He coughed up blood, not having the strength to stand. You were saying. Ares' eyes grew wide as he looked over to see Vegeta approaching him. Having lost the transformation, the Saiyan who seemed utterly indestructible only moments ago now looked like a complete wreck. He was running on fumes now, standing by sheer hatred alone, but Vegeta had never turned a challenge down in his life. Breathing heavily with only one eye open, clutching his side which was now horribly blistered from his burns, Vegeta staggered towards his enemy. Ares painfully forced himself up to his feet before slowly assuming a hesitant fighting stance. Deep down, he knew he didn't stand a chance against Vegeta at full strength. But the broken prince in front of him was far from 100%. A lucky shot here or there, and he might have a chance. Vegeta spit out a mouthful of blood to the sand, before flashing a smirk. Hope you're ready to die, Tuffle. I promise, I'll make your last moments as painful as possible. Ready when you are, Vegeta phased out and reappeared behind Ares, gripping him by his red hair and bending him backwards before he could finish the word. Before Ares could even register that Vegeta was now behind him, the prince brutally slammed his fist down right into Ares' sternum. He snickered at the way his enemy writhed in the sand. And here I thought you'd be a challenge, Vegeta snorted. What a waste of my time. Leaning over with a wince, Vegeta grabbed Ares by the hair again to drag him back up. He didn't have much energy left, so he figured he'd make this faster than usual. No sooner had Vegeta decided to put Ares out of his misery once and for all than he was met with a desperate fistful of sand right to his eyes. Letting go of Ares, his hands went to his face as he screamed curses, taking a couple of steps back. Having bought himself precious seconds, Ares flipped open a compartment in the armor covering his forearm and pressed the button that was there. You worthless piece of trash, I'm going to beat you until you're fucking unrecognizable. Vegeta screamed in a frightening rage, his eyes burning as he staggered back over to Ares. Completely livid now, he reached down and hauled his enemy up by the hair. Ares just laughed at him much in the same way that Vegeta had laughed earlier. Go ahead, Ares taunted him, talking with a mouth full of blood as Vegeta pulled a dangerous fist back. Kill me. It won't save you. Vegeta faltered at that, his blood-red eyes narrowing. What? Ares smirked at him, and Vegeta already knew he wouldn't like what he heard. I thought there was a chance this might happen. My men planted a bomb deep in this planet's mantle. I already activated it. This planet is going to blow, he laughed. I win in the end, Vegeta. Vegeta's lip twitched. He released Ares, who fell back into the sand, laughing the entire way. Raising one trembling hand towards his enemy, he summoned up all of the energy he had left and began unloading ki blast, after ki blast, after ki blast. Again, and again, and again. Even when Ares' laughter had long died, Vegeta kept firing, his teeth grinding together the entire time. To have come so far only to be one-upped in the end made something inside of him snap. He didn't stop firing until a hand came over his wrist. Hey, that's enough, Trunks said. Save your strength. We need to go, Vegeta, Nappa added. As if on cue, the ground beneath them started to violently rumble like an earthquake. The strength of it knocked all three Saiyans off their feet. The planet's going to blow, we need to get out of here. Where the fuck are the space pods? Vegeta yelled at Nappa. They're coming. Finally, the rumbling ceased. The relief lasted only for a few seconds before all three of them could make out an explosion in the distance. Trunks forced himself up to his feet, his legs still gratefully numb. All in all, his strength was slowly returning, and he was back on his feet in no time. He turned and offered his father a hand, but Vegeta stubbornly batted it away. He raised his head and gave Trunks a cold glare through his one good eye. You aren't going back with us, boy. What? Trunks asked, genuinely surprised by this. But they were interrupted by 3 space pods crashing into the sand about 10 yards away from them. Vegeta couldn't believe how much he actually missed those things. We have to get off this planet, Nappa said, turning and hauling Vegeta up to his feet without asking for his permission. The prince growled in annoyance at this, but he was too weak to stand any longer under his own power. Turning around, he made eye contact with Trunks. I want you to leave, kid, he told him bluntly, his features setting into his familiar scowl. Just give the verbal command and tell the computer what planet you want to go to. I don't care where you go, but make sure I never see you again. If I do, I'll kill you myself. Understand? Trunks stared blankly at Vegeta, not believing his ears. After everything they had been through together, his father still hated him. He could see the hatred clear as day, and he couldn't help the disappointment that settled deep inside of him. He had been under the impression that Vegeta had, at the very least, tolerated his existence instead of despising it. But it seemed like he couldn't have been more wrong. Nappa shot Trunks an apologetic look, before pushing Vegeta along, single-handedly holding the completely exhausted prince up on his feet. We gotta go, Vegeta. You too, kid, unless ya wanna be fried on this planet. Yet Trunks mumbled, limping behind them as fast as he could just as another, closer explosion went off. Really, he should have been happy about this. He could finally go to Earth. Did it really matter what Vegeta thought of him? Trunks climbed into his space pod last, instinctively looking around to make sure there were no explosives planted. Lights flickered on as soon as the door closed after him. Another explosion went off and the ground started to rumble again. Trunks squeezed his eyes shut and rubbed his eyes, trying to remember the command. Destination. Trunks stammered wearily. Outside of his pod, he heard Vegeta and Nappa's pods take off. He lost his train of thought completely as his mind went back to his father. Would he get in trouble with Freeza if the planet was destroyed? Worry tightened in his stomach at the thought. Destination, the computer prompted him again. Oh, right. Set destination to planet Earth. Destination set to planet Earth, galaxy number 7, South Sector. Confirm or deny. Yes, that's right, let's go, Trunks hissed impatiently. He was instantly shot back into his seat as the space pod took off into the air. Destination set. Trip length qualifies for induced sleep if user desires. It was good timing. No sooner had the dark universe come into view through his oval window, than a brilliant flash of light erupted, making Trunks raise his hand to shield his eyes. Exhausted himself, Trunks leaned back, finally releasing a deep breath. He was about to close his eyes and rest when he saw a familiar button on the control panel. It was the button he had used to disengage the communications before. He stared at it for a few seconds, tempted. It would be wrong to listen in on Nappa and Vegeta uninvited. What would his mother do if she was here? Trunks pressed the button. Fucking knew and you didn't tell me, his father's irate voice came in. His harsh tone made Trunks flinch. I'm sorry, Vegeta. I just promised your father that I would try my best to look out for your lineage. There was silence for about 10 minutes. Trunks was actually dozing off when Nappa's voice abruptly woke him. Do you think it was a good idea to let the kid go, Vegeta? He was a tough kid. Suddenly very awake, Trunks waited for the answer. Finally after about 5 minutes, Vegeta's exhausted voice came through. It doesn't matter. My flesh and blood won't serve Freeza. Not while I live. Yeah, well, the bastard's not happy at all with us right now. What else is new, came the mumbled response. Yeah, but they're talking about desertion. What are we going to dash Nappa? Just shut up and let me fucking sleep, Vegeta replied, his voice weary. That was the end of the conversation. Trunks leaned forward and pushed the button to turn off the communications. The teenager rubbed his eyes as his head started to spin. His father asking him to leave and not come back didn't seem to be driven out of hatred at all, at least, not completely. While he would have normally been thrilled, he was instead worried sick. Vegeta was likely to be reprimanded again by Freeza for something that was mostly Trunks' fault. His stomach churned at the thought that Freeza might say to hell with it this time and kill his father like he was nothing. Could he live with not knowing what was in store for his father? In a simple moment of clarity, he realized that no, he could not. Trunks then changed course and turned back around. I have no idea what you're talking about. Do not take me to be a fool, a deadly calm voice warned. I know you made the order. You did this. It has your name written all over it. These accusations are really offending me. Honestly, I'm hurt. Just completely destroyed on the inside by the lack of trust. Spare me your fucking theatrics, Freeza. Aside from my men, only yours have the power to destroy a planet the way Ruthless was destroyed. Ah, yes, my men are quite strong, aren't they? We set the rules for the Planet Trade Organization together, and you broke them. Ruthless was one of my planets. It was in my quadrant in the North Sector, and you sent your men to destroy it, and now you have the audacity to deny what you've done. Goodness! What dramatics! I assure you, I did not give any orders to have the planet you keep ranting about destroyed. In fact, I've never even heard of the planet until right now. My men saw 3 space pods leaving the planet that were yours, and not too long ago, one of my planets was mysteriously purged of all life with no sign of who was responsible. Freeza chuckled, his tail waving dangerously behind him. His hands were clasped together behind his back, his grip tightening with barely restrained rage. My dear, precious brother, might I make a suggestion that your men spend less time tracking random space pods and more time protecting planets in your quadrant? Perhaps instead of ranting at me over such a small loss, one that I had nothing to do with, you would be better served focusing on ruling over that small thing you call an empire. I don't know what your game is, Freeza, Cooler hissed over Freeza's scouter, but it ends now. If I see another one of your space pods in my quadrant, our truce is over. Do you understand what I'm saying, brother? That sounds an awful lot like a threat, Freeza replied calmly, though his eyes were narrowed into furious slits. Is that a threat, Cooler? It's a warning. I don't take kindly to warnings. Well, I don't take kindly to profitable planets in my quadrant being destroyed, and I'm sure Father won't take kindly to you disrespecting the rules we've established, one of which was that you stay the hell out of my quadrant. Or have you forgotten this? Freeza glared out through a window of his flagship at the vast expanse of space. It was true that he had agreed to stay out of the sections of the universe that belonged to his older brother, mostly because he wanted to keep Cooler appeased and at bay. Not because he feared him, but because Cooler annoyed the living shit out of him. However, unbeknown to the elder Cold Sun, Freeza had been cleverly and covertly breaking that agreement for years now. Cooler didn't have Freeza's natural-born instincts to rule, and many things slipped by his notice, a fact Freeza capitalized on time and time again. Freeza would find a profitable planet in his brother's quadrant that Cooler hadn't paid much attention to, and would send his men to purge it. He'd then sell the planet and reap the profits, and then send his men back to purge it again. The cycle would repeat until Cooler finally ventured over, when Freeza would finally back off and set his sights elsewhere. Ruthless was the next planet Freeza had set his sights on, an isolated and plentiful little planet, rich with wildlife and vegetation. Cooler would have never noticed Freeza's tampering if the damn planet hadn't been destroyed. I tell you again that I did not order this to happen, Freeza said, his voice deceptively calm. It wasn't a lie, after all. His order had been to purge the planet, not destroy it. His tail swept back and forth behind him in a dangerous rhythm as he continued, but out of the kindness of my heart, I will launch my own personal investigation to find out exactly who is responsible for this terrible deed. You do that. And remember what I said. Always a pleasure, brother, Freeza said with mock politeness, before reaching up and pressing a button on his red scouter to end the transmission. His glare turned murderous as he pressed the button a few more times. Zarbon, his right-hand man's voice came through 2 seconds later. Yes, Lord Freeza, come here at once. Right away, Lord Freeza. Freeza's tail waved methodically behind him while he brooded on how this was going to change things. Now that his brother had finally started to catch on to his game, it was going to be much harder to swipe out planets from his quadrant. He was likely going to have to kill Cooler off for good now, which he wasn't opposed to. Hell, it was only a matter of time anyways. But such an act would require planning so as not to draw his father's attention, and he had other things he had to address. Needless to say, he was not pleased. He was not pleased at all. The metallic doors slid open behind him. Zarbon strode in and then lowered himself to one knee to the marble floor, observing his lord warily from behind. Even though he was the one who overlooked the logistics of running Freeza's army, he himself was not above reprimand. He recognized Freeza's tone over his scouter and already knew that his lord had spoken to Cooler. Everyone in Freeza's army hated the tyrant's older brother simply because he aggravated Freeza, and that usually meant very bad things for them. Freeza slowly turned around to face Zarbon, his hands still grasped behind his back. He leaned forward a little, curiosity on his features as he asked Zarbon, remind me again, who exactly did you give the Ruthless purging assignment to? I gave that assignment, as well as the Liona assignment, to the Saiyans, Lord Freeza. All 4 of them. Yes, sire. I see, Freeza mused, falling into thought. All of this additional trouble, just because 4 particular Saiyans hadn't completed a simple and routine purging assignment. The planet wasn't even filled with warriors, there was no reason for this failure that Freeza could see. After all, Freeza had taken measures to ensure that outside of his army, Vegeta had no equal in the universe. He had personally taught Vegeta how to be cruel and merciless so the Saiyan could not be beaten. That meant there was only one logical explanation for this mission not being completed properly. Treason. Freeza straightened and slowly turned back around to look back out the glass window, giving Zarbon his back. It hadn't escaped Freeza's attention that Vegeta had been undermining his authority much more than usual these days. Freeza personally beat the Saiyan nearly half to death after each infraction, sparing Vegeta's life where he would have killed off nearly everyone else under his rule, but the Saiyan just didn't get it. And now, his insubordination had cost Freeza the opportunity to steal profitable planets away from his brother. It was completely unacceptable, and Vegeta was going to pay with his blood. Cancel the Liona purge. We won't venture into that quadrant of the North Sector until I take care of some other business. For now, you have a new assignment, Zarbon, Freeza finally said, his eyes dark and evil. I want the heads of Nappa, Raditz, and that half-breed Saiyan boy here within the next 20 hours, so I can crush their skulls beneath my feet. And as for Vegeta, I want him found and brought to me alive. I have something very special planned for my favorite little pet. But we're not even sure they survived the explosion. Oh, they survived. They're out there somewhere, all of them. And if they aren't here within the next 20 hours, you will be the one whose skull I crush beneath my foot. Am I clear, Zarbon? Lord Freeza, Zarbon started, trying to keep his panic out of his voice. It was to no avail as his words came out rushed. We have been trying to track Vegeta and his men for some time now. Their original space pods were all taken off the grid almost as soon as they left base for their purging assignments. Nappa checked in several days ago, and he took some new space pods with him back to Ruthless, but the tracking in those pods was destroyed by some kind of electromagnetic interference when the planet exploded. So look into their scouters, Freeza said, as though it was obvious. We have, Lord Freeza. Only Vegeta and Nappa scouters are currently online, but they have some kind of encryption that our team of technicians can't break through. We therefore can't pinpoint their location, and we can't communicate with them. Vegeta must have tampered with the space pods and the scouters, Freeza deduced. The Saiyan knew good and damn well that it was against the rules to do such things. Yes, treason seemed to be on the horizon, and it was best that Freeza took care of it now. Well then, I suggest you get to work so you can meet your deadline, he said, already planning what he could do to break Vegeta once and for all. Zarbon's face paled a little, as he silently wondered if Freeza heard a word he just said. He cleared his throat. Lord Freeza, the Saiyans could be anywhere by now. We need more time to find them. Sir, your deadline is. He struggled to find the words, before finally saying, impossible to make. I'm sorry, could you speak up and articulate your words, Zarbon? I don't think I heard that last part correctly, Freeza said, his tail curling and uncurling threateningly. Zarbon knew that there was nothing wrong with Frieza's hearing. He looked down and relented. I will have 3 Saiyan heads and 1 dethroned prince here within the next 20 hours, Lord Freeza. Ah, now I can hear you clearly. Now remember, Zarbon, I want Vegeta alive. I will be very, very displeased if he is brought to me dead. Understand? Yes, Lord Freeza. Good. Now get to work. Freedom or death, Nappa. One or the other. No matter what, Frieza's reign over us ends today. Nappa released a deep, anxious breath as he mulled over Vegeta's last words to him. It was Vegeta's, correct, opinion that they were both as good as dead if they went back to Frieza's home base planet, so they might as well make a break for it while they could. And that's exactly what they were doing. It was all or nothing now. If they were caught, they would be killed for sure. Nappa's tail tightened unconsciously around his waist. The stakes were at an ultimate high now, with both Vegeta and Freeza knowing each other extremely well. The only difference was Freeza had an entire army at his disposal, whereas there were only 3 men on Vegeta's side. Well, 2 now. Nappa had his arms crossed over his chest while he stood protectively next to the rejuvenation chamber the prince was currently in. The younger Saiyan had been in there over a day now, having passed out cold in his space pod after his ordeal with the Tuffles. He'd been completely unresponsive when they finally landed, despite Nappa's efforts to wake him. Finally, Nappa had simply hauled Vegeta out of his space pod and slung him over his shoulder, carrying him from his space pod into the rejuvenation chamber as quickly as possible. All Nappa could do now was wait, but every moment that passed made cold sweat run down the large Saiyan's back. Before Vegeta had succumbed to his exhaustion, he had given Nappa a final set of instructions. Nappa, to his credit, had followed his prince's directions down to the letter. Vegeta had set course for them to land on Freeza planet number 30, a small planet mostly used for equipment storage, with little personnel. There had only been a few soldiers of the army there when they arrived, exactly what Vegeta had been counting on. Nappa had made quick work of them before they could get the chance to report back to Freeza or Zarbon that he and Vegeta were there. No sooner had he done so, than he heard Zarbon's voice come over the scouters of the dead soldiers, giving the order that if any Saiyan stepped foot on the planet, to let them know at once. Nappa had gathered up the scouters in complete silence, knowing that if he destroyed them all that Zarbon would know immediately. He had dumped the scouters outside of the base, gone back for Vegeta when the coast was clear, and hadn't left his prince's side since. Truth be told, it unnerved him that Vegeta had picked, of all planets, one of Frieza's bases for them to land on. The prince believed without a shadow of a doubt that one of the last places Zarbon and Freeza would look for them was on one of Frieza's own planets. After an entire day passed without incident, Nappa conceded that Vegeta might have been right. Still, he looked over at the rejuvenation chamber where the prince was. The burns on Vegeta's body were almost fully healed, much to his relief. As soon as Vegeta came to, they were going to make a run for it. Nappa had no clue where they were going to go, or what they were going to do, but he figured Vegeta would have a plan. The prince always had a plan. One thing was for sure. They couldn't stay there too much longer. Someone was bound to notice that no one from the base on this planet was checking in. Nappa glanced over at Vegeta again, before deciding that he would give his prince another few hours to heal. After that, for better or worse, they were going to get the hell out of there. The large Saiyan jumped with a start when the lights on his blue scouter flickered. He cursed, his heart immediately pounding in his chest. Damn, he was on edge. He took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down when he saw that it was just an incoming transmission. He stared at the scouter coordinates, before frowning. The prince had strictly forbidden him from taking any kind of transmission, but the scouter trying to reach him was Vegeta's, which meant it was Raditz checking in. Well, he didn't say not to talk to Raditz, Nappa reasoned. He walked out of the room, reaching up and pressing the button on his scouter a few times to receive the transmission. That is completely unacceptable, Zarbon roared. I'm sorry, sir, a meek, short red alien technician said nervously as he looked up at the furious green alien leaning over him. We're trying our best to hack the encryption key, but the design on Vegeta's scouter is custom made. We can't get anything dash. I don't care if it's custom made. Zarbon exploded in frustration, startling everyone in the room and making them gape at the uncharacteristic outburst. Zarbon was usually very smooth and composed, but what they didn't know was that Freeza wanted blood spilled, and if it wasn't red like Vegeta's, then it was going to be blue like Zarbon's. 10 of the 20 hours were up on Frieza's deadline, and Zarbon was losing his patience by the minute. He had radioed into every planet in Frieza's rule and warned everyone to be on guard for the Saiyans. He'd then dispersed the army and sent them looking into all nearby friendly planets, but it was nearly impossible to blindly track down 4 Saiyans in the short deadline Frieza had set. His only hope was that one of the technicians could crack into one of the Saiyan scouters and at least give him some kind of lead. The crew on Frieza's flagship was working to the bone trying to come up with a technical solution, but whatever encryption Vegeta had put on the Saiyan scouters, it was damn good. I want to know where those rotten monkey bastards are, and you'd all better have an answer for me within the next hour, or I'll deliver all of your heads to Lord Frieza instead. Zarbon promised, glaring at every technician in the lab. Sir, we need a transmission to give us a framework we could hack into, the technician said warily, his complexion turning redder than his skin at the threat Zarbon was making. Neither Nappa nor Vegeta have made any kind of transmission. Until we have a live link, we're stuck. Well, you had better think of something, if you know what's good for you, Zarbon warned in a cold voice. He then spun on his heel and marched out of the lab angrily, his blue cape flowing behind him. He stood right outside the lab doors, reaching up to his scouter and pressing the button a few times. Dodoria, come in. After a few seconds, Dodoria's voice came through. Dodoria here. How are things looking on your end? Zarbon asked, hoping his comrade was having better luck back on their home base planet than he was on Frieza's flagship. Dodoria looked over the shoulder of the closest lab technician to him, seeing him trying to decode the last encrypted transmission sent on Vegeta's scouter. It looked like gibberish to him. For all he knew, the man was playing some game in a language he didn't understand. He frowned and left the room to speak to Zarbon in private. Not good, he finally answered in a low voice, walking down a hallway. No one recognizes this encryption Vegeta used. It's custom dash. Yes, it's custom made, I know. Zarbon cut off impatiently. Keep me updated if your group makes any progress. Lord Frieza's deadline is tight. How much longer? 10 hours. That's not enough time dash. Don't remind me. Just do what you can. Will do. Zarbon sighed and took a moment to regain his calm, before turning around and heading back into the lab. As soon as he did, a technician ran over to him, waving a roll of freshly printed sheets. We just got a live link between Vegeta and Nappa's scouters, Zarbon, the technician said, before handing over the sheets with a smirk to a very relieved Zarbon. And we cracked the encryption. Here is the transcript of the conversation, and here are the coordinates for both scouters. Meanwhile, back on Frieza's home base planet, Dodoria was cursing as he strode down a hallway. There weren't any spare scouters in the equipment room, and his was acting up. He couldn't even force a low-ranked soldier to give him his, since the place was mostly deserted, with everyone hunting down the Saiyans per Zarbon's orders. Hissing in frustration, the pink alien rounded a corner to go see if the labs had any extra scouters on hand. As soon as he did, he was violently blindsided by what felt like a missile, sending him crashing through the doors of an empty storage room. Dodoria let out a startled cry as he was sent sprawling on his stomach, his scouter sent flying. He immediately growled and went to retaliate, already swearing a painful and slow murder of whoever was stupid enough to assault him. He only made it up to his hands and knees, though, before the unmistakable cold metal of a sword was pressed right under his chin. Make one wrong move and I will cut your fucking head off, a deadly serious voice snarled from behind him. Don't test me. What the dash? Dodoria gasped when an excruciating pressure was pressed on the small of his back. He struggled in vain to break free, but whoever had him pinned down was extremely powerful. Dodoria growled, who are you? What do you want? I ask the questions here, not you. Got it, the voice hissed. Dodoria frowned and stopped struggling, even though the sword was still under his chin. That voice. He recognized that voice, but from where? I don't have to tell you a goddamn thing dash. Dodoria's voice was suddenly muffled by a blue jacket being wrapped around his mouth to the back of his head. Faster than he could blink, the sword removed. Suddenly, a debilitating blow was delivered to the small of his back, paralyzing him from the waist down. Dodoria's scream of agony was muffled by the jacket. He squeezed his eyes shut in misery as he felt the tip of the sword pressing right against the back of his head. Now we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice, Trunks sneered from behind him. The teenager glanced over his shoulder briefly, using his senses to make sure no one was close by, before turning his attention back to Dodoria. You tell me what Frieza's done with Vegeta, and I might let you live. If you even attempt to scream, you'll be dead before anyone hears you. Understand? Dodoria lay perfectly still, exhaling furiously through his nose, not willing to give in. Trunks growled and mercilessly drove his good knee into Dodoria's shattered vertebrae, making the alien squirm in agony underneath him. Trunks kept applying the pressure until Dodoria finally nodded desperately. Trunks let go and pulled his jacket away, and Dodoria immediately released a hiss of pain as he lowered his face to the cold floor. Well, Trunks demanded angrily, pressing his sword into the back of Dodoria's head for emphasis. Where is Vegeta? No one knows. Dodoria growled in frustration. Trunks frowned at that, his resolve diminishing a bit. What? The bastard is completely off the grid. No one knows where he is, but Zarbon is working on cracking the encryption on his scouter as we speak. Dodoria chuckled a little, before adding in a smug voice, it's only a matter of time before one of our teams figures it out. That fucking monkey won't run forever. We'll find him. You just wait and see. As if on cue, Dodoria's scouter whirled to life. Dodoria and Trunks both glanced up at it as Zarbon's voice came through. Vegeta and Nappa's locations confirmed both are on planet Freeza number 30. Still working on pinpointing Radit's exact location. He's in a space pod in flight. Requesting surveillance on planet Freeza number 30 effective immediately. No one leaves the planet until I give the command. Landing shortly. Shit, Trunks thought bleakly, the blood draining from his face. Despite the agony he was in, Dodoria laughed. They're already there. Soon, Vegeta will be captured, humiliated, and then finally put out of his misery. How far is that planet from here? A 2-hour flight. You'll never make it, the pink alien said smugly, before finally managing to twist his head around to see who exactly was pinning him down. He snorted at the sight of the teenager behind him. Ah, I remember you now, boy. Vegeta's newfound mutt. You got a price on your head too, kid. Trunks looked down and scowled. I do, huh, that's right, Dodoria confirmed. You and the rest of you goddamn Saiyans. You're all dead. Every last one of you. Not if I have anything to say about it, Trunks growled. He then drove his sword through Dodoria's flesh, killing him instantly. The teenager withdrew his sword, grabbed his jacket, and slowly got up to his feet, wincing as he did. His knee was still bothering him, but he was ignoring it. He cursed under his breath, absently wiping his sword clean on the back of Dodoria's armor. Except for a couple men who had spotted him when he climbed out of his space pod, both of whom were now dead with their bodies completely disintegrated, Trunks had snuck into the base with ease, what with his ability to keep his power level down. The first thing he'd done was go get his clothes back from the old changing room, along with his sword. It wouldn't hurt having the weapon in case push came to shove and he had to face Freeza. Except the tyrant wasn't there. Trunks slipped on his leather capsule cork jacket, looking down at Dodoria. He should have asked the alien where Freeza was before he killed him. There was no way he could make it to the planet Vegeta was on in time to save him from being captured, assuming his father was actually there. However, Trunks had gotten a taste of Frieza's twisted state of mind. If Vegeta was going to die, it wasn't going to be at Zarbon's hand. It would be at Frieza's. Instead of chasing a backtrail that would lead nowhere and waste valuable time, it was best that he just sit tight and wait to see if Vegeta was even captured in the first place. Determined now, Trunks put his sword back in its holster and slung it over his shoulder, a hard edge to his blue eyes. Turning around, he headed out to find out where Freeza was, so he could be ready to save his father if need be. And if he had to torture every last being on base to get the tyrant's location, then so be it. Vegeta frowned, his senses picking up on the ice-cold fluid he was submerged in as he slowly regained consciousness. It was a peaceful sensation, almost serene, and he relished in it for a few moments in his foggy state. He took a deep breath through his oxygen mask, sending a flurry of bubbles up in the rejuvenation chamber. Slowly, his mind started to focus as it sorted through the fiasco with the Tuffles, as though he was flipping pages in a book. The more images he saw flash through his mind, the more the weight of the situation bared down on him, and the more his ki flared up. The prince suddenly growled, and his ki exploded in a flash of blinding white light. The glass of the rejuvenation chamber cracked for a second, and then shattered instantly from the pressure wave Vegeta effortlessly generated. The fluid flooded out and coated the floor of the medical room. Vegeta threw off his mask and stood up, the healing fluid still dripping from his body as he climbed out of the tank. Glass crunched under his bare feet, cutting into his skin, but Vegeta didn't notice as he looked down at his naked torso, examining himself. His burns were gone, and that lingering pain that he'd been fighting due to the Tuffle poison was diminished. Finally, he looked down at the palms of his hands. He was healed, fully and completely, and he could feel new power prickling every pore of his skin. For the moment, he forgot about locating Nappa as he wondered if he was strong enough now to take Freeza on himself. Oh good, you're awake. Vegeta's dark eyes shot up to Nappa who was walking in, carrying an extra dark blue battle uniform along with a set of brand new armor, gloves, and boots. On top of the pile was a brand new green scouter. The large Saiyan looked relieved as he walked over to his prince. I was just coming back to wake you up, Nappa said, extending the pile over to Vegeta. It's been over a day, Vegeta. We need to move. Report, Vegeta ordered gruffly, taking the blue battle uniform and quickly starting to get dressed. Everyone's looking for us, but no one's tracked us here. Doesn't seem like they can track the space pods. We should be able to use them to go wherever we want, Nappa reported. Vegeta silently pulled on his white gloves, so Nappa continued, where are we going to go, Vegeta? Vegeta scowled but didn't respond. He turned to Nappa and took the new set of armor from him, tugging it down over his head. Finally, he took the brand new scouter out of Nappa's hands. Perhaps planet Earth, where Raditz is, Vegeta answered, slipping on the scouter over his left ear. He looked up at Nappa and gave him an almost lopsided smile. I didn't tell you earlier, Nappa, but I am damn glad you made it to Rithika when you did, thank you. Nappa blinked in surprise, before feeling pride swell up in his chest. Such words were so extremely rare for the prince to say, that Nappa found that he actually couldn't remember the last time he'd ever heard Vegeta thank anyone. He couldn't even articulate how proud he was that finally, for once, he'd done right by his prince. Finally, he'd been strong enough to actually protect and save Vegeta. To have it actually acknowledged was a gift he hadn't anticipated and one he didn't take lightly. Just fulfilling my duty to you, my prince. Nothing to thank. Nappa was instantly silenced, doubling over in front of his prince, the same prince who had just viciously slammed his right fist through the stomach padding of his armor. Vegeta's arm was elbow deep inside Nappa's stomach, leaving the larger Saiyan sputtering with pain and deep betrayal. Vegeta's smile was long gone as he cocked his head to the side, observing his comrade with cold hatred and indifference. What a pity that even when the topic is my son, my own fucking flesh and blood, your duty to your dead king is still more important than to your living prince, Vegeta sneered. Nappa slurred through a mouthful of blood. Vegeta smirked, licking his lips in amusement from Nappa's pain. Tell my father that he now has his most loyal subject at his side again, compliments of his loving son, Prince Vegeta. With that, Vegeta fired a violent ki blast that sent Nappa flying back and crashing hard against the wall. He was dead before he hit the floor. Vegeta scowled and looked down at his upturned hands again, in the same position he was in before Nappa arrived. He grunted, clenching his fists tightly and completely unfazed over the fact that his right arm was soaked in Nappa's blood all the way up to his elbow. He was only concerned with how much power he now had as he once again wondered if it would be enough. He then removed his scouter, frowning down at it thoughtfully. He glanced up at Nappa's body which was sitting up unnaturally against the wall. With a snort, Vegeta tossed the new scouter over his shoulder and strode over to his fallen man. Reaching down, he nonchalantly removed Nappa's blue scouter, putting it on over his own left ear instead. After all, why synchronize a new scouter when Nappa's was already synchronized? As soon as he slipped the scouter on, lights were immediately activated. Vegeta quickly stepped over Nappa and poked his head out the door, glancing down the hallway each way. He cursed under his breath when his scouter told him there were several power levels approaching down the left end of the hallway. How the hell had they found him? No matter, he had no time to dwell on that. He needed a plan and he needed it now. Thinking quickly, the prince looked over to the right, lifted his hand out, and fired a strong ki blast in that direction. The blast flew down the hallway and collided at the far end with stored explosives, resulting in a violent explosion. The smoke hit Vegeta less than a second later in a hot rush. Another second later and the smoke had filled the entire hallway, obscuring all vision. Vegeta hesitated a second, closing his eyes and focusing. What do you mean his power level dropped? Zarbon yelled furiously at Kui as he ran up behind him. They both winced and lifted their hands up as a wave of smoke hit them, blinding their vision completely. I mean it. I had a red on him. It was at 20,000, but then it dropped down to nothing. Kui yelled back, coughing from the smoke. Maybe whatever that blast was killed him. Vegeta heard them both with his sensitive hearing. He opened his eyes and smirked in their direction, before taking off running to the right, using the smoke for cover. He moved as fast as he could, dodging random equipment littering the hallway while he heard their footsteps behind him. Growling, Vegeta spun back around and fired a slew of blasts their way. He heard Kui yell out in pain and that was good enough for him. He turned around and saw that he'd reached the end of the base. The space pods were so close now. Using his momentum, he lowered his shoulder like a linebacker and barreled through the wall completely. The light outside was bright and stung his eyes for a bit, but then the space pod landing came into view. Freedom. The word was so real he could practically taste it. Without hesitating, he charged over to the nearest space pod. He took all of 2 steps before he was viciously knocked flat on his back. His ears were suddenly ringing, his vision exploding with bright colors, his body feeling like it had just gone through the ringer. With a low groan, he groggily rolled over, struggling to get back up to his feet. You're good, Vegeta. I give you that, a familiar voice said. Vegeta blinked and shook his head, recognizing the voice but not able to place it. He slowly got up to his hands and knees as blood suddenly ran into his eyes. Dazed, he tried to stand, but he fell back to his knees. He growled in frustration and a hint of confusion. What the hell had struck him without him even noticing? He couldn't think straight at all. But when you got abilities like ours, everyone else always comes in last. He looked up, squinting, only to see a deadly group of 5 suddenly standing in front of his only means of escape. A short, round, 4-eyed alien waved at him. Nothing like a little time suspension to dish out a good beating, Vegeta. Guldo laughed. 1 second you think you're gonna win, and then the next, you can't even remember your own name. Got the whole damn army looking for ya, mate, G snickered. Lord Freeza ain't gonna be happy, I'll tell ya that. The Jinyu Force. God damn it, Vegeta cursed, his heart sinking down into his stomach at the sight of them. He glared at them with disdain in his gaze as he slowly forced himself back up to his feet. What's the matter? Can't fight me when I can actually see your attacks coming. Vegeta sneered bitterly, finally standing even though he staggered back a little. Why should we all get our hands dirty? Captain Jinyu asked with a smirk. Really, only Guldo was necessary to ensure that no one left this planet. But we couldn't help wanting to see you one last time, Vegeta. We just like you so much, we had to say our goodbyes before Lord Freeza finishes you once and for all. He sure is pissed too, Rikum added with a deep laugh. I don't know what you did but you really riled him up. He's not the only one who's pissed, Zarbon growled, stepping out through the hole Vegeta made in the wall, Kui on his trail. Vegeta did a quarter turn, not giving anyone his back. He backed up a bit, his eyes going from the Jinyu Force to Zarbon, then over to the space pods. Zarbon saw his line of sight and snorted. Don't even try it. You are coming back with me whether you want to or not. Vegeta snarled venomously at him, baring his teeth and stating his case without words. Zarbon sighed dramatically, before turning to Kui. Go collect the dead Saiyan in the medical room. We'll bring him with us to appease Lord Freeza. Kui nodded and ran back inside the base as Zarbon turned to Vegeta. Now, do you have any other friends hiding here? I don't answer to you or anybody else. Not anymore, Vegeta hissed at him, raising one forearm and wiping the blood from his eyes impatiently. Zarbon chuckled, before beginning to remove the sleeves on his arms, preparing for a fight. Well, Vegeta, he smoothly said, we'll just see about that. Vegeta shifted back in a fight stance, eyeing the Jinya force warily out of the corner of his eye. Don't worry. We won't get involved. We only dropped by on Zarbon's request, Captain Jinyu assured him with a smirk. Vegeta sneered hatefully at him, before turning his attention fully to Zarbon. Zarbon looked Vegeta over for a few seconds, before chuckling again. He flicked his braided hair back, his earlier anxiety completely gone. Even if he couldn't find the other two Saiyans, he knew he'd be off the hook just by bringing in the Saiyan that was standing in front of him. With that knowledge, his cocky swagger was back in full swing. Vegeta, you really are a fool, Zarbon mused, shaking his head in disappointment. You should give up. It would be so much easier for you. Never, Vegeta growled. Zarbon smiled, as if hoping that was the response he'd get. So be it. That was all the warning Vegeta got before Zarbon charged right at him. Unfortunately, there were 5 others who charged Vegeta right at the same time. Vegeta was on the ground faster than he ever thought possible, taking an old-fashioned beating as everyone got their hits in. He thought he heard someone laughing that they just had to do it for old time's sake, but he couldn't be quite sure. He tried to retaliate when and where he could, even managing at one point to get back up to his feet. But he was outnumbered 6-1 and he was severely outmatched. After someone's boot connected hard with his temple, he was left completely dazed and out of it. He stopped trying to fight back and could only make vain and feeble attempts to protect himself from the vicious assault as they brutally battered him. Finally, it mercifully ended. Vegeta was left face down, motionless and cradling his head on the ground, lying in his own blood. He could only hear bits and pieces of what was said, the voices fading in and out. Wants him alive. Kill this monkey. 2 more left. Treason. The voices finally faded out altogether, until he was roughly kicked in his ribs. Vegeta hissed and rolled onto his back, his arms still cradling his head. Everything felt like it was spinning, making him severely nauseous. A few seconds later, someone grabbed him by the collar of his armor and started dragging him away to his sure death. He moaned weakly, unable to even open his eyes, much less put up any kind of resistance. Quite suddenly, his thoughts turned to his son, Trunks. The kid was a tough bastard. Maybe he would avenge him someday. The prince managed a weak and bloodied smile at the thought before he finally passed out from the beating he took. He had no idea just how soon that someday would turn out to be. Loving this tale? Support Infinite Novel by subscribing for weekly audio adventures. The planet was beautiful. He admired it for a moment, cocking his head to one side, awed by the colors reflecting in its atmosphere. The planet was red, with a brilliant radiance of blue surrounding it, marking the layers of its atmosphere. Yes, such a wondrous radiance could only mean one thing: the planet exploding would cause such delightful fireworks. With a dark and evil smirk, Freeza fired a lethal blast that spiraled down towards the red planet. Freeza's smirk spread into a grin when the planet exploded before him, a display of red and blue lights as the once beautiful planet was reduced to atoms. He licked his lips in amusement. It was just as wonderful as he thought it would be. Suddenly, his red scouter lit up with a dual transmission. Freeza sighed. His fun was always interrupted. Yes, father? Freeza asked, sounding almost bored as he turned around and headed back into his flagship. Freeza, King Cold greeted. Your brother and I are waiting for you. Right. Just can't wait to see you, brother, Cooler added, sarcasm dripping off every syllable. Freeza rolled his eyes in annoyance. It was that time again. Every 6 weeks, the Colds held what they affectionately called the trials. Soldiers who committed grave crimes against the Cold Empire were sent there to be tried by King Cold and his sons, with his fellow soldiers as his jury. So they said, it was actually a glorified, humiliating, and barbaric display of public executions, reserved for soldiers who really pissed off Cooler or Freeza. It always wound up being King Cold and just one of his sons. The brothers could barely stand to be in the same galaxy, much less in such close quarters with each other. They had a silent understanding that they alternated their appearances, and this time, it was Cooler's turn to make his appearance. Freeza deduced that his father was truly a stupid bastard not to see their routine. He always got this stupid transmission when it was his time to sit out, and he always gave the same answer, which he readily gave now. I can't go this time, father. I have a few planets that I need to tame. I will, however, be watching the live projection when I can, and I will send Zarbon to represent me. That's a shame, son, King Cold said, snickering a little. Well, do what must be done. If you have time, please try to stop by. The trials are being held on planet Arina J in Cooler's quadrant this time. Of course, father, Freeza said with feigned politeness, before seeing one transmission disappear. He frowned at the one that remained. There was silence for a few minutes, before Cooler's voice came through. So, brother, how goes your investigation? Cooler asked mockingly. I'm still working on it. Good. I can't wait to hear what you find, Cooler sneered. Freeza chuckled. Well, my dear brother, you just wait and see, he smoothly said, before reaching up and turning off the communications on his scouter altogether. Turning around, Frieza's face darkened a little as he headed towards the dungeons of his ship. He could have easily thrown Vegeta into the trials, which would have guaranteed his death. However, Freeza only sent his soldiers when he was present, so that he could be the one to humiliate and kill them. The thought of his father or his older brother punishing Vegeta repulsed Freeza. His little Saiyan pet was his, and his alone. Only he was allowed to punish him, and that's exactly what he was going to do. Where are they? Behind him, Vegeta could hear the whip in Zarbon's hand. The snaps and crackles of the fire burning down the loose, thick wires promised familiar misery, a song and dance of pain that he had experienced so many times that he'd lost count back when he was a teenager. Mixed in with the fire, he could hear a lethal buzzing sound. That was the sound that was really making him sweat. It meant that some of the wires weren't on fire, but were charged with live and deadly electricity. The fire, he was used to. The electricity, not so much. When wielded with enough force, the electric wires ripped his skin so severely that his body was unable to fully heal the wounds, tattooing him permanently with scars to complement those he got in battle. His ki also reacted badly when the raw electricity mixed with his blood, zapping his strength and always leaving him feeling sick and weak for days afterwards. Sweat ran down Vegeta's face and into his eyes. He squeezed them shut. "I asked you a question, Monkey Prince," Zarbon whispered dangerously right behind Vegeta's ear. "Where is that half-breed boy, and where is Raditz?" "Never heard of them." The punishment for his response was immediate. The fire and electricity both shredded the sweaty flesh of the Saiyan's bare back, burning the skin raw. Vegeta hissed through clenched teeth, his knees buckling involuntarily from the pain as he shifted his weight to the wrist guards clamped together over his head. As soon as he did, the wrist guards automatically tightened, making the shards of metal on the inside rip into the already badly damaged skin of his wrists. Vegeta bit his bottom lip hard to keep from verbally expressing his pain. The wrist guards were producing a relentless stream of blood that had both of his arms and his shoulders completely soaked in crimson, the blood trickling down his chest and his back. He was restrained just low enough for him to stand, a feat that was becoming more and more difficult the longer the torture went on. Grinding his teeth together, the prince forced himself to shift his weight back to his feet and alleviate the pain in his wrists. The blood loss was making him weaker and more lightheaded by the minute. "Care to change your answer?" Zarbon asked with clear amusement in his voice. Vegeta spit on the floor, before falling into a stubborn silence. "Well, are you going to tell me what I want to know, or do I have to beat it out of you?" Vegeta snorted in morbid amusement, turning his head and cocking a sarcastic eyebrow. "What was the question again? I forgot." Zarbon rained deadly hell on him, thrashing him mercilessly and making Vegeta feel like he was being burned alive. The prince lost the strength to stand and let the wrist guards hold him up completely, even though it felt like his hands were about to be severed off any second now. The electricity was searing through his blood and into his veins, making his ki protest violently. He hung his head when it was over, his eyes squeezed shut, his breathing harsh and pained. He felt like vomiting. "You think you're cute with your smart mouth," Zarbon snarled, coming around to face him. The wires hanging down from the whip in his hand were dancing and snapping, lighting up the dungeon cell with flickering, dangerous orange and blue lights. He grabbed Vegeta by the jaw and roughly jerked his head up. Vegeta opened his eyes with difficulty as Zarbon sneered in his face, "But we'll see just how much you mouth off when Lord Freeza deals with you." "I'm not afraid of that freak," Vegeta growled, his voice garbled from Zarbon's grip. He sounded extremely convincing, considering that he was lying. Hell, part of him was purposely prolonging this torture with Zarbon just to avoid the confrontation with the tyrant. "You should be afraid. He's not happy with you, Vegeta. Might finally put you out of your misery." "About bloody time, I say," Zarbon said with a snort, shoving Vegeta's face roughly to the side. "He's spared you too many times in my opinion." Unable to stand the pain in his wrists any longer, Vegeta once again shifted his weight back to his feet, forcing his knees to hold up by sheer strength of will. He glared at Zarbon, defiance and pure hatred in his dark eyes. "Well, what can I tell you, Zarbon? I'm just so goddamn likable," he sneered. The prince barely had enough time to turn his face away before Zarbon violently thrashed him again, this time letting the deadly wires rip his flesh from the front. Vegeta rocked back on his heels, the force from the impact alone enough to knock him off his feet had it not been for the wrist guards. He could feel electricity burning down the side of his face, arms, and chest, slicing his skin open mercilessly. He grit his teeth together so hard his jaw ached, panting through his nose. Zarbon was pulling back again when a voice sounded from behind him. "That's quite enough, Zarbon. I know you're having fun, but do try to contain yourself." Zarbon looked over his shoulder in surprise before moving out of the way as Freeza casually strolled in, as though this were an everyday scene. Vegeta looked up through one eye, his pain briefly forgotten. His judge, jury, and executioner had finally arrived. He released a shaky breath, cold fear trickling down his spine for the first time in a long time as his fate became all too real with Frieza's arrival. Freeza looked Vegeta over, taking in the Saiyan's weak and bloodied form, before nodding in approval. "Quite the job you've done here, Zarbon. Well done." Zarbon smirked with pride. "Thank you, Lord Freeza. Did you get him to talk?" "No, not yet." "I see," Freeza said with an amused chuckle. "That's all right. The remaining two are of no concern." "Well, Zarbon, I would like a word with my favorite monkey alone." "You have other business to tend to anyways. You know what today is." "The trials," Zarbon affirmed. Oh, he definitely knew the day. Over half of Frieza's army usually attended, and it was through no coercion on Frieza's part. There were fights, and they were always brutal and always to the death. They appealed to everyone's bloodlust like an arena of gladiators. Zarbon had seen hundreds, and it was a great show, as long as you weren't among those being tried, anyways. Indeed. I suggest you go and start preparing for your attendance, so you can represent me. Yes, Lord Freeza. Vegeta forced himself to stand when he heard Zarbon leave, trying his best to look calm and fearless. It was to no avail, his muscles were all twitching involuntarily from his now overwhelming physical and emotional stress as he felt Freeza approaching him. Freeza casually put his hands behind his back and grasped them together, slowly circling him as he studied the Saiyan's injuries closely. Vegeta swallowed under his scrutiny, his body tense as he broke out into a cold sweat. He flinched when he felt Frieza's cold finger on his arm, swiping across his skin. The tyrant lifted his finger up and licked Vegeta's blood off it, considering the taste with an air of dignity like he was wine tasting. I must say, tears are deliciously salty, but nothing compares to the wonderful mix of blood and sweat. Quite delectable. Wouldn't you agree? Vegeta remained silent, his stomach churning. You know what I don't like, though, my pet monkey? Freeza asked nonchalantly, trailing one finger down one of the few undamaged patches of skin on Vegeta's back. Vegeta flinched again and growled low in his throat in warning, but the tyrant continued on. I don't like that all the signs are pointing to you committing treason. It hurts me, Vegeta. It really does. I care so much about you, and this is how I am repaid. Vegeta's legs spasmed with pain as Freeza slowly dug his fingernail into an open and ripped cut in his back. The prince's knees buckled and he couldn't help the pained groan that escaped him as he squeezed his eyes shut. I took you in as a child. I showed you such wonderful hospitality. I taught you how to fight. Honestly, you're like a son to me. I am not your son, Vegeta hissed through his teeth, his face red as he panted through his nose. You might as well be. It's not like your parents wanted you. Your father handed you over with no problems at all. Couldn't get rid of you fast enough. It was sad, really. You were so young, I just had to take you in. Oh, don't be upset, Vegeta, Freeza snickered, observing the prince with sinister and cold eyes. Vegeta was shaking so badly from both his rage and his pain, he couldn't form a single word. I still care about you. In fact, I care about you so much, that I am willing to make a deal with you. He finally pulled his finger back, and Vegeta gasped in relief. Freeza smirked in amusement and clasped his hands behind him, circling the Saiyan again, his tail methodically waving behind him. You see, Vegeta, you put me in a bit of a hard situation. Ruthless was in the northeast quadrant of the north sector. That's Cooler's quadrant. Vegeta's face paled, realization dawning on him. Freeza stood in front of him now, his eyes narrowed and dangerous. What were your orders? Vegeta hesitated a second too long. The violent blow that struck his chest was too fast for him to see, and it shattered almost the entire left side of his ribcage on impact. He cried out in pain, the strength in his knees vanishing. Fresh and hot blood ran down his arms. Darkness tinted his vision for a second. What were your orders, Vegeta? Purge Ruthless and Liana, Vegeta answered, his words slurred through a mouth filled with blood. And you disobeyed both. Now I have to deal with my brother. You know how much I just love doing that, Freeza sneered. He sighed as he regarded the Saiyan in front of him who was now struggling to breathe. But, as I said, I will make a deal with you. You prove your allegiance and your loyalty to me, and I won't tell Cooler that it was you who destroyed Ruthless. I didn't destroy the goddamned planet, Vegeta wheezed, blinking wearily. He felt dizzy. Freeza tilted his head. Oh, then who did? The Tuffles were hiding there. Frieza's eyes darkened at Vegeta's words. His men's enemies were hiding on a planet that belonged to his brother? How fucking convenient. He doubted it was coincidence either. Briefly, he wondered if the Tuffles were working for Cooler all along. It was a thought. Freeza put it on the back burner, mentally cataloging this information for later scrutiny. After all, a few twists here and there in his favor, and he could even spin this information on his brother. It would provide him the rationale needed to kill Cooler once and for all. I engaged them, Vegeta continued. You engaged them? Freeza interrupted. I destroyed them, Vegeta corrected himself. But he broke out coughing harshly, hacking up more blood. His eyes briefly glazed over, before he stubbornly shook it off as he continued, they planted explosives and blew up the planet. Wasn't me. A likely story. I'd be inclined to believe it, if it wasn't for your extended absence. What is your explanation for that? Vegeta's skin crawled. Telling the truth was sure to sentence him to death. But what kind of lie could he give? He tried hard to come up with a lie. He'd lied to save his skin so many times before, but his mind was drawing an alarming blank. Really, Vegeta? It's a simple question. Just tell me what I want to know. Prove your allegiance to me, and your sins and failures will be forgiven. You'll be healing in a rejuvenation chamber before you know it. I promise. Vegeta felt some of his inner strength die. It was a blatant lie, and he knew it. How many empty promises of mercy had he himself made to his victims, knowing all the while that he was going to slaughter them regardless? Part of him couldn't help but wonder if they felt the same way he was feeling now. So utterly helpless. That's bullshit, and we both know it. You're here to kill me. So just get on with it and do it already, Freeza, he grumbled, his voice weary. Freeza looked appalled. My dear, precious monkey. Weren't you listening when I told you that I care for you like you were my son? How many times have I forgiven you in the past? He asked. Vegeta gave him a wary look. Just answer the question. I give you my word that I won't kill you, if you just answer my question. Vegeta looked away, remaining stubbornly silent. Freeza chuckled, before nodding. Very well. As a token of my good faith, to show you how willing I am to forgive, I will just assume that you got lost for a little while on your way to Ruthless. See how much I care about you, Vegeta? Sparing your life again and again. Why, I've been sparing your life going back to when I destroyed your filthy monkey race by blowing up your planet. Vegeta's eyes immediately shot back to him. At the look on his face, Freeza laughed at him. Yes, it's true. It was me. Surprised? He'd always suspected, but never had it confirmed until now. Overwhelming loss suddenly fell on Vegeta's shoulders, the weight of failure bearing down on him with the truth laid out in such clarity. He could hear the whispers of millions of his people in his ear, all disgusted with him for being so weak. Destined Savior, Destined Super Saiyan, Saiyan Elite, Saiyan Prince. Nothing but false titles he didn't deserve. His deep shame crippled him and he lost what little strength he had left, letting his eyes drift closed. Freeza smiled a cruel smile. The prince was cracking. Just a little more, and he'd be broken completely. Now, pay attention, because this is your last chance at redemption, my pet. You know the words. Say them and all will be forgiven. He didn't flinch this time when Frieza's cold fingers settled around his jaw. Unlike Zarbon, Frieza's touch was almost gentle as he raised Vegeta's head so they were eye level. Vegeta swallowed heavily. His glazed-over eyes fluttered open briefly, before rolling back, his body desperately craving rest. Oh, come now, Vegeta, Freeza chuckled, shaking Vegeta's head and forcing the prince to stay conscious. Stay with me. You're so close. Just say the words. Vegeta squeezed his eyes shut. He fell into a stubborn silence, though he was giving serious thought to just giving in. His pride was screaming at him though. It was better to die a free man, than continue living like he was, it was saying. He was a prince, not a slave. His life as it stood before him was a fucking disgrace, as it had always been. How could he go back to it? I know you're in pain and so your memory might not be clear, so let me give you the words to say. I swear my allegiance to you, Lord Freeza, to your galactic army, and to the Cole family, in that order, and I would readily die in your name, the tyrant prompted. The hair on Vegeta's tail rose and bristled, before he tightened it around his waist. Freeza tilted his head a little, smirking a sinister smirk as he painfully tightened his grip on the Saiyan's jaw. Say it. Vegeta made up his mind and forced his eyes open. He stubbornly blinked his haze away, his eyes slowly refocusing before settling on Frieza's triumphant gaze. He opened his mouth to speak, but never got the chance. Zarbon suddenly walked in, looking slightly pale. Freeza rolled his eyes and sighed in annoyance, releasing his grip on Vegeta's jaw. He slowly turned around to face Zarbon directly. Zarbon, what have I told you about interrupting me when I'm busy in here? Freeza asked calmly, clasping his hands behind him, his tail waving impatiently. Lord Freeza, my apologies, but well, Zarbon said, shifting uncomfortably. Out with it. Do not try my patience, Freeza hissed, his tail whipping behind him now. Zarbon took off his blue scouter and extended it to Freeza. You need to take this transmission, sir. The tyrant gave him a suspicious look, before lowering his gaze to the scouter. Finally, he reached out and took it with a sigh. This had better be good, Zarbon, or you'll be in Vegeta's place next, he warned in a cold voice, removing his red scouter and handing it to Zarbon, who nodded numbly. Freeza then turned away from him and looked at the coordinates on the blue scouter, recognizing whose scouter they belonged to. What is it, Dotaria? Freeza asked, sounding almost bored. Oh, you mean that pink, spiked freak, a smooth voice responded. Sorry to disappoint, but well, he's kind of dead. Frieza's eyes narrowed dangerously. I find that hard to believe, he said, keeping his voice cool and collected. He snapped his fingers at Zarbon, mouthing for him to get location coordinates immediately. Zarbon nodded and turned around, heading out in quick strides, his cape waving behind him. There was a dark chuckle. Believe what you want to. Who is this? Why don't you come find out? Trunks asked, surveying the white stone buildings in front of him or what was left of them. He had single-handedly demolished the entire military base of Frieza's base planet. The previously proud structure was now in shambles, and there was a huge cloud of dark smoke rising from the fire of his vicious ki blasts. The teenager knew where Freeza was, but the problem was that space pods just couldn't fly to Frieza's ship. Freeza chose which pods were allowed to dock on his flagship. As such, there was no verbal command Trunks could give to get to his father. He was stuck, and in his frustration, he had leveled the entire place in a manner that was dangerously close to a purge. He didn't even realize it, focused on what he could do to get to his father. Finally, he decided on a little baiting, hoping he could convince Freeza to let him reach his flagship, or, even better, that he could convince Freeza to show up where he was. Freeza chuckled in amusement. I see. So that's how we're going to play. Trunks smirked, lifting his sword and surveying the blood on it nonchalantly. You know, Freeza, I think I just took out about a quarter of your army. I wasn't really impressed. Yes, well, that's because my finest are attending a special event at the moment, Freeza replied calmly, right as Zarbon walked back in. Frieza's eyes sharpened on him, and Zarbon just shook his head with a bleak expression on his face. The communications are all down. No one's scouters are active except Dotaria's, he said in a quiet voice. Planetary surveillance says everything's been destroyed. Freeza stiffened at that, his eyes darkening as he realized that this was more than just someone deciding to be cute and act tough. He turned to face away from both Zarbon and Vegeta, before crossing his arms over his chest. "You have my undivided attention," Freeza finally said, his calm voice sounding almost polite, even though his eyes were murderous. "What do you want?" "I want Vegeta." Freeza frowned and glanced over at the prince out of the corner of his eye. Freeza never had any intentions of sparing Vegeta's life, he just wanted the prince to beg for mercy, so he could see the look on his face when he killed him anyways. The tyrant exhaled slowly as he observed the Saiyan for a few more seconds, tempted to just send a beam through his heart right now. To hell with his fun execution. His monkey prince was becoming more trouble than he was worth. "Well, I do sincerely hate to disappoint, but Vegeta belongs to me. I'll be happy to hand his dead body over to you once I'm done though. Corpses always leave such a filthy odor. I wouldn't do that if I were you." "Oh? And why is that?" "Because if you kill him, I will bring a hell into your life the likes of which you have never seen." Freeza blinked in surprise, stunned at the words. Finally, after a few seconds, he burst out into loud, maniacal laughter. "You think just because you defeated some of my weak, low-ranked soldiers that you can make threats like Dash? Do you know what a Super Saiyan is, Freeza?" Frieza's laughter immediately died. At once, he knew who he was speaking to. After all, Vegeta was with him, and Nappa was dead. The only other options that were left were Raditz and the half-breed boy. The same half-breed boy who had somehow been hiding his power when Vegeta first brought the boy before him. For the first time that Freeza could remember, unease squirmed its way into his guts. Monkey folklore. There is no such thing. "Well, why don't you come back to your base planet, or let me go to your ship? I'll be more than happy to give you a monkey re-education." Now. There is no need for such hostility. I am sure we can come up with an agreement. No blood needs to be shed. If you want Vegeta, you can have him after I'm done with him. How does that sound? "I want him alive," Freeza, Trunks hissed. "Of course, my dear boy. Of course," Freeza said, his tail starting to wave behind him. He smirked a sinister smirk when a plan dawned on him. Looking back at the Saiyan Prince, Freeza decided that Vegeta might still be useful to him yet. He's here with me now, and he's still alive. I'll tell you what. Let me just wrap up with him, and then I'll tell you where you can go to retrieve him. What do you say? That sounds good, in theory. How will I know that he'll be where you tell me he is? And how will I know that he'll be alive? Don't you trust me?" "No," Trunks said bluntly. Yes, Vegeta's taught you a thing or two. But not everyone is a liar like my sweet little monkey prince. If I tell you where Vegeta will be, then Vegeta will be there. What do you think? Will you come out and play?" Trunks ran a hand over his mouth, his mind and heart both racing. He had little leverage, and he begrudgingly admitted to himself that he would simply have to take Frieza's word for it, and pray with all his heart that Vegeta would be there and be alive. "Where will he be?" he finally asked, his voice neutral and guarded. "Planet Arina J. I look forward to seeing you there." Freeza reached up and ended the transmission, before removing the scouter and tossing it back to Zarbon. He then turned and walked back over to Vegeta, who was struggling to breathe. At the look of brilliant rage on the tyrant's face, the blood drained from Vegeta's face. He opened his mouth to speak. Wait dash he was silenced by a rain of blows that cascaded down upon him with a fury unmatched in the existence of the universe. Thousands of beatings he'd taken in his life, but none had ever been as relentless or vicious as the one the tyrant was currently unloading on him. Vegeta could barely gasp for air, the blood flying out of his nose and his mouth as Freeza brutally and mercilessly laid into him. After one particularly nasty shot to his face, his wrist guards were jarred free from their chains on the ceiling. Vegeta never got the chance to fall before Freeza had him suspended again, his tail wrapped tightly around the Saiyan's neck to hold him up as he continued his battering without missing a beat. Vegeta's bones were being shattered, each blow more agonizing than the last, jarring him and denying him the unconsciousness that he craved to escape the mind-numbing pain he was in. Even Zarbon had to actually look away. Frieza's tail finally released Vegeta, who collapsed immediately, hoarse as he desperately gasped for air. The prince slowly rolled over to his side, his body shaking as he hacked up blood from the vicious beating. He finally rested his head on the cool ground, exhausted, defeated, and completely demoralized when it sank in that the tyrant wasn't even trying. Freeza observed his hands, before raising one knuckle up to his mouth. He licked Vegeta's blood off, before gazing down at the broken Saiyan laid out at his feet. "You are more trouble than you're fucking worth, Saiyan," Freeza snarled venomously. "I was going to put you out of your misery. But, it seems that you can still fulfill one last assignment for me. You're going to help me see just how serious, or just how much of a joke, this new threat is." He tilted his head a little, before smirking cruelly. "You shouldn't live too long after what I just did to you, so don't worry. Your pain will end in due time. Now, before I send you away, there's just one last thing. The tail, Vegeta. The tail has simply got to go." He suddenly grabbed Vegeta's tail and jerked it hard, hauling the prince over to him and forcing Vegeta to roll onto his stomach. Vegeta suddenly realized what Freeza said, and he panicked. He tried to get away, but that quickly stopped when Freeza brutally slammed his foot down on his lower back, pinning him down. Vegeta grappled valiantly with his pride, but when he felt Freeza forcefully pulling on his tail while twirling it, he finally broke. "Don't, please," he pleaded, his voice raw with desperation. His eyes squeezed shut in shame over the fact that he was practically begging, but his tail was all he had left. It was one thing to lose it in battle, it was quite another to have the destroyer of his people strip him of the very thing that made him Saiyan. He couldn't handle it. He couldn't. His whole body was shaking at the prospect of having Freeza do this to him. Freeza chuckled. He'd been enraged by having his hand forced by some Saiyan half-breed, but the beating he dished out on Vegeta was wonderful therapy. Now, having the prince at his feet and actually asking for mercy, it was delicious music to his ears. This tale has brought you much more agony than anything, letting you transform into such a disgusting creature, drawing attention from ancient enemies of your people, old feuds you had nothing to do with. This tale is both a burden and a bullseye. My dear little monkey, can't you see? I care about you so much that I simply have no choice. Before the prince could get a sound out, Freeza sliced his tail off with one well-aimed beam, leaving only a small nub. A jolt of pain seared Vegeta from head to toe. Freeza smirked and raised the tail up, observing it curiously. Filthy monkey appendage. Honestly, I should have done this long ago. He threw it aside in disgust, and removed his foot from Vegeta's back. He kicked Vegeta hard in the ribs, forcing him to roll onto his back. Freeza regarded him curiously, before smiling at him. Maybe I should just put you out of your misery, my dear prince. Vegeta's eyes were swimming with hot tears as he peered up to see Freeza standing over him. He'd lost his freedom, his home, and now, his precious tail. Everything that mattered to him was now gone, all at the hands of the alien standing over him triumphantly. He had failed, and was going to die having lived out a completely worthless existence. He had achieved nothing. No vengeance, no retribution, no legacy. Nothing to look back on with pride. Nothing but his painful, humiliating death, a death he could feel was slowly but surely coming with the extent of his injuries. A death he completely deserved, he suddenly realized. Just do it then, he finally said, giving up as his pride shattered like glass. Freeza laughed in delight. Goodness! What would your father say if he saw you now? He'd probably disown you again. When Vegeta stayed silent, Freeza sighed in disappointment that he couldn't bait the Saiyan. Oh, you're just no fun, Vegeta. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to make you useful for the little time you have left. Zarbon? Yes, Lord Freeza, my scouter. Zarbon headed over and handed the tyrant his red scouter back. Freeza slipped it on while he continued, get Vegeta dressed in his armor, and take him with you to the trials. Quickly, Zarbon. I don't want to keep my father and my brother waiting. Freeza casually strolled out of the dungeon cell. He reached up and activated his scouter, before seeking the transmission he wanted to make. After a few seconds, the transmission was picked up with a beep. What do you want, runt? Cooler's peeved voice came through. You're interrupting my entertainment. Freeza chuckled. Well, how rude. I just wanted you to know that my investigation was a success. I found the man responsible for the demise of your planet, Ruthless. He's already confessed to his treason, and now he must be tried. Oh, really? His brother asked, his tone slightly disbelieving. And who was it? Vegeta. Vegeta? Cooler asked, unable to keep the surprise out of his voice. Indeed. You know his rebellious nature. I've tried correcting it, but I've grown tired of it now. Do you want him or not, brother? I have no qualms taking care of him myself. No, I want him, Cooler asserted, anger in his voice now. He'd always hated Vegeta since he was a child. The Saiyan's temper, murderous violence, and sanity had worsened with time, but he was born with his smart mouth. It had burned Cooler alive when Vegeta, as a child, had mouthed off to him that at least he wasn't forced to serve the worthless cold sun. Cooler wasn't as strong as his brother, but outside of his family, he was the strongest being in the universe and could have crushed Vegeta like a gnat. However, it was strictly against the rules for him to kill one of Frieza's soldiers and vice versa. Plus, Freeza always protected Vegeta under the logic that the Saiyan would suffer only if he wanted him to. Needless to say, having Freeza now gift-wrap Vegeta to him made Cooler's mouth practically water with bloodthirsty anticipation. Send him immediately. I am. Zarbon will bring him shortly. I'll be waiting then. Cooler ended the transmission, and a dark smirk spread over Frieza's features as he smoothly headed upstairs to the main floor of his ship. His stride never broke until he finally got to his main office. He walked in and his levitating seat came over to him. Calmly, Freeza took a seat, before going over to the near wall. He pressed a few buttons on his levitating seat, and a live holographic projection appeared before him of the trials being held by his father and his brother. With a satisfied smile, he leaned back in his seat and snapped his fingers. A few seconds later, a servant came in with a glass of wine. Freeza took it without moving his eyes from the projection, not even aware that he still had a good deal of Vegeta's blood on his hands. Normally, Freeza wouldn't have hesitated in killing off Vegeta and then sending for the boy to come to his ship to meet his death as well. It was the mention of the Super Saiyan state, however, that made Freeza hesitate. He saw no harm in volunteering his brother and his father as experiments to see just what he was up against. After all, what else is family good for? Freeza thought to himself with a smirk, before casually raising his wineglass for a drink. The scene in front of Trunks was unlike any he'd ever seen in his life. The teenager was laying on his stomach on a high ridge, out of sight. Down below was something that looked like a makeshift arena. There were thousands of soldiers gathered, all standing around a large square patch of sand that was dark with different shades of spilled blood. There were two soldiers currently engaged in a fierce battle on that square, but even from where Trunks was, he could see that one of them was severely outmatched. The crowd roared its delight when the weaker warrior finally had his legs blown right off with a vicious ki blast. At the very front of the action were 3 thrones, and behind them was an enormous spaceship. Only 2 of the 3 thrones were currently occupied. One of the occupants slowly rose up and strolled over to the fallen man. He was smooth and sleek in his movements, his dark purple tail waving behind him casually. Trunks couldn't hear what was being said, but from the soldier's motion, he was clearly begging for mercy. It wasn't granted. Cooler nonchalantly placed his foot on his skull, and Trunks looked away so he wouldn't see the inevitable as the crowd roared its bloodthirsty approval. Trunks swallowed, finally convinced that Freeza hadn't lied to him. If the tyrant hadn't killed off his father, then subjecting Vegeta to the barbaric display in front of him seemed right up Frieza's alley. Closing his eyes in concentration, the teenager tried sensing his father's signature key to no avail. There were simply too many warriors gathered. He took a deep breath and pulled away to climb down into the mayhem. He was just going to have to find his father the old-fashioned way. Meanwhile, Vegeta was sitting with his back against a wall, in yet another dark and dingy dungeon, this time in King Cold's flagship. He'd been dressed in modified and supposedly improved armor that didn't give him the shoulder, hip, and crotch guards he was used to wearing. His battle uniform was black to hide the alarming amount of blood seeping through it, though his white gloves had quickly stained crimson red from his damaged wrists that were still bleeding. He swallowed when he heard the roar of the crowd outside. He himself had attended the trial so many times, he'd lost track. Now he was on the other side though, and it broke his already shattered pride into even more pieces. He was going to be forced to fight, but he could barely rouse the strength to even raise his head. Everyone would see him fall in battle and think he was weak, knowing nothing about his condition that was crippling him with every breath he took. Briefly, he contemplated stripping out of his armor to show King Cold and Cooler that he was a waste of their entertainment. Cooler wasn't as strong as Freeza, but he had a no-bullshit attitude that Vegeta respected. If he wanted you dead, he killed you on the spot. No slow, sadistic mind games like Freeza liked to play. Just a fast and ruthless execution. Vegeta knew that Cooler would put him down like the wounded animal he was if he revealed the true severity of his injuries. He sighed a wet and shaky sigh, his lungs burning with the simple act. For the first time in his entire life, Vegeta cursed his Saiyan blood. His Saiyan genes were working relentlessly to heal him, but all it was doing was slowing down the inevitable. He just wanted it to end already. He wanted peace, for once in his life. Peace and quiet. The kind of peace and quiet that only comes with death. He was slipping in and out of consciousness when a rough hand came down and grasped his armor. Before Vegeta could even process that he wasn't alone anymore, Zarbon already had him hauled up to his feet, single-handedly holding him up. "Let's go, Monkey Prince," Zarbon chuckled, using both hands as he forced Vegeta to walk. "It's time for you to get yours." Meanwhile, Trunks was weaving in and out of the crowd of cheering soldiers. He drew some strange looks for his lack of armor, but he still had Dodoria's scouter on, even though he had wisely deactivated it. It was just enough to make people shrug him off as an idiot instead of a threat, which is what he was counting on. Trunks was trying his best to spot his father, but it was incredibly hard. He ignored the sudden roar that ripped through the crowd, until he heard King Cold's booming voice slicing through the night. Vegeta, third-rank soldier in Frieza's galactic army, accused of treason. The gravest of crimes, King Cold announced with a malicious grin as Zarbon dragged Vegeta in front of him. Zarbon forced the prince to his knees in front of the two tyrants. Vegeta looked up through hazy eyes as the bloodthirsty crowd screamed its approval with almost manic energy. Vegeta had made more than a few enemies in Frieza's army as well as Cooler's, and everyone wanted to see him die. "Kill him, worthless son of a bitch. Let me at I am. What do you have to say for yourself, soldier?" Cooler asked, a dark smirk of satisfaction on his face. Vegeta observed him, before lowering his head in defeat. He stayed silent, and Cooler's smirk spread. "No defense. How sad. So you admit to your treason? You admit to the accusations of breaking the rules of engagement in the Planet Trade Organization by destroying a planet that was off limits on your own accord, and then attempting desertion of my brother's army, while orchestrating the desertion of 2 other soldiers as well?" The crowd hushed to an electric buzz while Trunks observed his father in alarm. He couldn't get a sense of Vegeta's ki at all. His fear was worsened when a soldier next to him whispered to another man, "You getting a read on Vegeta?" "Yeah, but it can't be right. It's barely over 1,000. "No, that's what I'm getting too." "Damn, I thought he was a lot stronger than that. Guess he ain't what he's cracked up to be." "Oh, what's the fucking point? Might as well get this shit over with." Vegeta's defeated voice rang through Trunks' mind. "Yes," Vegeta finally admitted, his head still down. "The sentence is worth or death," King Cold announced, to no one's surprise. The sentence was the same for everyone, no matter the crimes committed. "You know the drill, Vegeta. If you can prove your worth in battle, you will be forgiven." Vegeta stayed silent. He did indeed know the drill. The problem was that the fights were never fair. The Colds always made sure to completely overmatch the soldiers being tried. He was intimately familiar with the routine, because he was usually the hand-picked soldier on the other side of this equation. His thinking was confirmed when King Cold continued, "Your opponent is Zarbon. You two may begin." Zarbon smirked as everyone roared their approval. He shoved Vegeta with his boot, and the prince helplessly toppled over to the sand. Vegeta rolled over and struggled valiantly to get up to his feet as Zarbon started to circle him. "Come on, Monkey Prince. Do try to give me something of a challenge," Zarbon told him mockingly, before laughing. He knew the extent of Vegeta's injuries, but he didn't care. Even though he himself always obeyed Freeza to the letter, the tyrant wouldn't have hesitated to kill him off if he pulled half the shit that Vegeta did. The Saiyan was rebellious, but his penchant for violence and ruthlessness earned him favoritism with Freeza that burned Zarbon alive with jealousy. It delighted Zarbon to know that Frieza's patience had finally run out with Vegeta, and that he was going to be the one to deliver the Saiyan's last defeat. Vegeta managed to get back up to his knees before Zarbon leveled him with a punch that forced him flat on his back. Vegeta groaned in pain when he felt his jaw break from the blow. Trunks' eyes narrowed and he reached up behind him, gripping the handle of his sword. Pathetic, Zarbon laughed, leaning over the prince. Vegeta opened his eyes and growled, anger suddenly sparking in his dark eyes. Fueled by his pain and his hatred from Freeza taking his tail, Vegeta scraped up everything he had left and flung his hand up towards Zarbon, releasing a violent, blue ki blast that caught Zarbon completely off guard. The blast hit Zarbon right in the face, making the alien scream in agony as he stumbled back, covering his eyes. Trunks hesitated when he saw the move, before smirking a little with pride. His pride was quickly replaced with concern when he saw Vegeta's arm fall and his eyes slip closed. "You're going to pay dearly for that," Zarbon hissed furiously, stalking back over to the completely defenseless Saiyan. "I'm going to die," Trunks finished for him nonchalantly. Zarbon sputtered, before looking down and seeing a sword right through his chest. He looked up at Trunks in shock, and the look was shared by thousands. Cooler and King Cold were both wide-eyed and stunned at what they were seeing. Trunks withdrew his sword, and without a word, sliced Zarbon's head clean off his body. There was nothing but silence in the night. Trunks took advantage of the moment, turning around and going over to his father. He gingerly crouched down next to him with a wince, his knee still in bad shape. He reached out and put a hand on his father's chest, his blue eyes studying Vegeta intently. He was deathly pale and soaked in sweat, his breathing coming out quickly and harshly. The alarm spread through Trunks when his sensitive nose caught an enormous amount of blood. "Father," he softly said, trying hard to keep the panic out of his voice. Vegeta looked wrecked, making the beating Trunks saw him take at Frieza's hands look tame. Trunks swallowed hard, raising his hand just under his father's swelling jaw to feel for his pulse. It was weak. Vegeta groaned at the contact, and Trunks' brow furrowed in concern. He reached up and put a gentle hand on his father's forehead. Vegeta was cold to the touch. "Just hang on a little longer. I'll help you," he promised. "He's going to die one way or another, you know," a dangerously smooth voice said. Trunks looked over at Cooler out of the corner of his eye, and his blue eyes darkened. Slowly, he stood up. He twirled his sword a couple of times in his hand, observing the cocky-looking alien in front of him. "For your sake, you better hope he doesn't," Trunks borderline snarled. Cooler laughed at him. "You want to challenge me? I don't know who you are, boy, but I do know that you are a fool. You are completely outnumbered." "Oh, just get on with it, Cooler," King Cold cut in, sounding completely bored. "We have others that need to still be tried. He's just a boy." "Kill him enough," Trunks interrupted. "I don't know who you are either, and quite frankly, I don't care. I'm taking Vegeta, and we're leaving. If any of you try to get in my way, you'll all die. What's it going to be? How about a third option?" Cooler sneered at him. Trunks scowled, he didn't have time for this bullshit. A burst of wind swept up around the teenager, fluttering his jacket and his hair as Cooler continued. "How about you die instead?" The scouter on Cooler's face suddenly exploded, cutting him off. Thousands of other scouters exploded at the same time. Simultaneous alarm and fascination rose up through everyone as a whirlwind of sand blew up around Trunks. Vegeta was still close enough that the sand hit him dead on, stirring him back to reality. He squinted over at the blurred sight of his son standing a few feet away from him right as a wave of golden ki exploded around Trunks. His lavender hair tinted gold and his eyes turned into a piercing and ruthless shade of teal as a wave of sheer energy and strength blew up the sand all around him. Back on Frieza's flagship, a glass of wine shattered as the projection ended. Suddenly very conscious, Vegeta's eyes were wide with shock as he stared blankly at his son. He was completely amazed by the display of power in front of him. Absent-mindedly, he wondered if he had died, or if he was hallucinating. "Trunks is a Super Saiyan?" he wondered in disbelief. Catching his thought, Trunks cast him a sideways glance and a smirk. Vegeta then knew this was very real. He was so delirious with pain and with the adrenaline of seeing his son making the legendary transformation, that he actually laughed out loud. His laughter broke into harsh coughing and he winced. He rested his head back and caved into his exhaustion again, smiling as he did. He could die now with pride. He did have a legacy. Trunks was his legacy. Trunks frowned as he observed his father. He didn't have much time left. The teenager had to make this quick. He was vaguely aware of Cooler making some threats to him, but he paid him no mind. Turning and raising his hand out, Trunks fired a lethal ki blast that took out hundreds of soldiers in one fell swoop. He was cold and methodical as he continued firing, the Super Saiyan speed and strength in his blasts rendering any hope for escape useless. The chaos that ensued was a whirlwind of violence. Hundreds of soldiers suddenly charged Trunks, with others taking to the air and firing rapid blasts in his direction. The teenager took to the air in a golden blur faster than anyone could see and killed everyone who was airborne in under 2 seconds with masterful wielding of his sword. Some saw the inevitable and tried to escape, but Trunks saw them and killed them immediately. His senses suddenly picked up on a powerful blast coming his way. He turned and batted it away, but his stomach clenched at what he saw. Cooler had his arm wrapped around Vegeta's throat while he grinned sadistically up at Trunks who was still in midair. Vegeta's eyes were squeezed tightly shut from the pressure Cooler was applying. Behind him, King Cold towered, his arms crossed smugly over his chest. "Bad move, kid," Cooler laughed. Trunks descended and landed uneasily on his bad knee. He stumbled back a step, before growling and pulling his sword back. Cooler tightened his grip around Vegeta's neck, making fresh sweat appear on Vegeta's brow. Cooler knew he was outmatched in his current form, and could tell this boy wouldn't give him the necessary time to make the transformations to even the field between them, so he was resorting to this. You're fast, but you're not that fast. I'll have his neck broken before you even get here. Trunks gripped his sword tighter and snarled, let's just see about that. Cooler and King Cold both raised their hands towards him and fired a stream of shots that would have effortlessly leveled planets. Cooler suddenly stopped firing when he saw his father's body fall in a beheaded heap next to him. He released Vegeta, who collapsed to the ground, before turning around to find himself looking into enraged teal eyes. Cooler didn't have time to get out a word before Trunks sliced him clean in half at the waist. He then fired a blast and launched Cooler's mutilated body clean into the distance. Trunks twirled his sword up and put it back in his holster, before going back over to his father, extinguishing his Super Saiyan transformation. He knelt down next to Vegeta and gingerly turned him over. The teenager blinked in surprise when his hands were suddenly covered with blood by the simple action. It was only then that he realized that the black battle uniform his father was wearing was drenched in blood. His heart sank to his stomach as he looked up around him. Vegeta needed help, but where could he get help? He was surrounded by thousands of corpses, and his father was going to become one of them if he didn't think fast. Shit, Trunks cursed bleakly, looking down at Vegeta, who was shaking uncontrollably at this point. Trunks bit his bottom lip, before gently grabbing his father to lift him. Vegeta recoiled from the contact and growled out of pure instincts. It's alright, Trunks reassured him, soothing Vegeta's nerves with his voice. I got you now. It's alright. You'll be alright, he promised, hoisting his father up over both of his shoulders like a soldier as he stood. Trunks glanced around, before setting his sights on King Cold's flagship. Yes, that was it. There were sure to be healing tanks in there. Except there weren't any. Trunks was almost desperate now, and was wondering if his father would last long enough for them to go to another planet so he could get help, when he finally walked into a medical room. To his dismay though, there were no healing tanks. There was, however, one blue alien working with a white coat on, looking like he was mixing a solution. He looked startled at Trunks' appearance. The teenager hissed at him, "My father needs help." "Help him," he ordered, going over to a white table. He gently laid Vegeta down on the table as the alien snorted. "Heh. I'm busy." His words were cut off by a steel grip on his throat, curious blue eyes locking on his. "I'm not fucking asking you, I'm telling you. Help him," Trunks snarled in his face. Okay, I'll try." The alien immediately caved. "You better do more than try," Trunks hissed, shoving the alien roughly over towards Vegeta. The alien gave him a glare, before going over to the white table, muttering under his breath about his talent being unappreciated. He observed Vegeta with the eye of someone who had seen this a million times, before turning to Trunks. "Help me get this armor off him." Trunks didn't need to be told twice. It was only when they stripped Vegeta of his armor and his black battle uniform, that Trunks finally realized how badly injured his father was. A wave of nausea overcame him and he had to close his eyes and breathe deeply to keep from vomiting. Once he regained himself, he turned back and worked on trying to stop the bleeding. It wasn't long until they used up all the gauze and bandages they had in the medical room. In desperation, Trunks shrugged off his leather jacket and peeled off his black tank top. He ripped it to shreds, using those as makeshift bandages while the alien checked Vegeta's eyes. The prince moaned weakly in pain. "This doesn't look good. He has severe internal injuries and he's lost too much blood." "Take some of mine then and give it to him." "I don't think it'll be enough." "I don't think he's going to make it." "Don't you fucking tell me that." Trunks suddenly screamed in his face, dangerously close to a mental breaking point. He wasn't aware that he had tears in his eyes now. "He lives, or I swear I will tear you to shreds and dash." "Gods above, stop yelling already." Vegeta's weak voice suddenly rang in Trunks' mind. The teenager immediately stopped his ranting and looked down at his father. "I'll go try to find the rest of the personnel," the alien told Trunks. "They might know how to help him better than me," he added, before scurrying out of the room with every intention of doing just that. He saw the blood still dripping off the handle of the teenager's sword, and he had no intention of being chopped to bits. "You have to hold on. You hear me?" Trunks growled down at his father. Vegeta forced his eyes open halfway, looking at Trunks, his eyes glazed over. "Told you not to come back." "You did. Why?" "Because you're my father. I had to." Vegeta's eyes drifted closed and Trunks didn't hear anything else. The teenager was about to panic when Vegeta weakly reached up his hand to him. Trunks took it instantly, before frowning as Vegeta lowered their hands. The prince put Trunks' hand on his bloody chest right over his heart, and covered the teenager's hand with his own. "Do it, kid." It took a few seconds before it dawned on Trunks what Vegeta was telling him to do. He growled and tried pulling his hand free, but Vegeta's grip tightened on his hand. "No!" Trunks practically yelled down in his father's face. "Are you insane? I won't do it." "What did I tell you about yelling, brat?" "Well, don't ask me to do something like that. You're going to be fine." "No, I'm not." "He didn't mean physically." "Yes you are. You have to be." You can't." Trunks' voice finally broke. "Don't. Not for me. I deserve this." "No you don't. Nobody deserves this." "I do. Rotten to the core. Evil bastard. I deserve it." "What goes around?" His grip loosened on Trunks' hand briefly, before tightening again. "That isn't you. That's just what he turned you into. You could be better. I know you could be better." Just do it, Trunks. Rather the reason I die, be you than Freeza. Super Saiyan. He managed a weak smile. I won't, I can't, please, son. Finally, after a few seconds, Trunks' hand started to glow. Want more thrilling stories? Subscribe to Infinite Novel and dive into infinite adventures.